In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war.
The galaxy burns with endless conflict. Yet something new has come. Something that has already conquered its own wars. The battles of heaven, the legions of hell, and even the chains of damnation itself. For 10,000 years, the Imperium of Man has endured demon princes, xenos monstrosities, and heretical nightmares. But now, they face a being that looks upon their endless wars not with fear or fury, but with pure disdain. Above the ash wastes of Armageddon, reality screamed. Not the familiar tearing of a warp rift, with its telltale psychic shriek and kaleidoscopic bleeding of immaterium into real space. This was different. Colder, more deliberate. Space folded inward like paper crushed in an invisible fist, and from that impossible wound stepped a figure wreathed in tattered crimson. Al Simmons, Spawn, emerged into the 41st millennium with the slow, deliberate movements of an apex predator surveying new hunting grounds. His symbiotic costume writhed with sentient purpose, necroplasmic tendrils tasting the air and finding it thick with millennia of accumulated suffering. The chains wrapped around his body rattled with anticipation, each link forged from the essence of demons he had personally destroyed. Behind him, the dimensional tear sealed with a sound like breaking bone. Spawn stood on the edge of a battlefield that stretched to the horizon, the perpetual war zones of Armageddon, where Orc Waz crashed endlessly against Imperial defenses. Smoke rose from 1,000 fires. The ground was a carpet of shell casings, broken weapons, and bodies in various states of decomposition. The sky churned with ash and chemical discharge. He inhaled deeply, and his costume recoiled in disgust. "Another hell," Spawn muttered, his voice carrying the rasp of the grave. "Just bigger." His enhanced senses, honed through death, resurrection, and apotheosis, cataloged the battlefield's parameters in seconds. The crude bionics on some corpses, the primitive ballistic weapons, the religious iconography carved into every surface, every piece of armor, every fortification. The psychic background radiation that permeated everything like cosmic static. And underneath it all, the screaming. Not physical screams, those were omnipresent, but something deeper. A psychic howl of a species drowning in its own brutality, calling out to a corpse god who could no longer answer. Spawn had heard similar cries before. In the depths of Hell's 8th circle, where the damned begged for annihilation. His cape unfurled like the wings of some primordial bat, tasting the warp's presence. The symbiotic costume hissed warnings directly into his consciousness. Danger. Predators. Many. Hungry. "Good," Spawn said. "Let them come." 3 kilometers away, Auspex operators in Firebase Demetrius registered the anomaly. Magos Explorator Hex 7. Delta stared at his cogitator screens with mounting alarm, his mechadendrites twitching in agitation. The readings made no sense. No warp signature, no xenos energy pattern, no tech heresy markers. Just a sudden, catastrophic spike in localized reality distortion, followed by nothing. "Impossible," Hex 7 Delta whispered through his Vox grill. "The Omnissiah's instruments do not lie, yet they report contradiction." Captain Mordred, of the Crimson Castellan Space Marine chapter, received the report 3 minutes later. A veteran of 200 years of warfare, Mordred had learned to trust his instincts over cogitator readouts, and his instincts were screaming that something was fundamentally wrong. "Dispatch Scout Squad Epsilon," Mordred ordered. "Full tactical spread, augur support. If this is a new war boss, I want verification before committing armor. Scout Squad Epsilon, 5 Space Marines in power armor bearing the Crimson Castellan's black and red heraldry, moved across the ash wastes with practiced efficiency. Their enhanced physiology filtered toxins from the air. Their auto senses pierced the smoke. Their bolters were loaded with blessed ammunition, each round sanctified against the unclean. Brother Sergeant Kyrus led the formation, his auspex pinging the anomaly's location with increasing precision. 2 kilometers, 1 kilometer, 500 meters. Then the auspex died. Not malfunctioned, died. The screen didn't flicker or display errors. It simply went black, as if something had reached through the device and murdered it. Kyrus raised his fist, halting the squad. In the eerie silence that followed, broken only by distant artillery thunder, he heard something that shouldn't exist on Armageddon. Chains rattling. The fog ahead parted, and Spawn walked through. The Space Marine's first impression was of wrongness given form. The figure before them stood roughly their height, but where their armor represented the Emperor's engineering perfection, this being wore something alive. The red cape moved with predatory intelligence. The armor, if it could be called armor, shifted and reformed like living tissue. Chains emerged from impossible angles, coiling through the air with serpentine grace. But it was the eyes that held them. Green fire that had witnessed the end of worlds and judged them wanting. "Soldiers," Spawn said, his voice cutting through the ash-choked air. "Here's your one chance. Turn around, leave, forget you saw me." Brother Kyrus's training overrode his instinctive unease. He raised his bolter. "In the name of the God Emperor of mankind, identify yourself. Are you human? Xenos? Demon?" Spawn's laugh was bitter and cold. "I'm done with gods. I'm done with angels. I'm done with demons." His chains began to glow with necroplasmic energy. "And I'm especially done with fascist theocracies that grind their people into meat for a corpse on a throne." The words were heresy beyond measure. Brother Kyrus didn't hesitate. "Purge the unclean." 5 bolters opened fire simultaneously, their explosive, mass-reactive rounds capable of punching through tank armor. 40 rounds per second, blessed by chaplains, consecrated in the name of the Emperor, struck Spawn's position with precision that would have shredded a Chaos Space Marine. The smoke cleared. Spawn stood untouched, chains forming a protective barrier that had caught every round mid-flight. The bullets hung suspended in the air, trapped in necroplasmic webbing, before dissolving into ash. "Wrong answer," Spawn said. What followed wasn't a battle. It was an execution. Spawn moved with speed that mocked the Space Marine's enhanced reflexes. His chains lashed out, wrapping around Brother Talon's bolter and crushing it into scrap before the Marine could fire a second burst. A backhand strike sent Brother Corvus flying 30 meters, his power armor crumpling like paper. Brother Kyrus swung his combat blade, a monomolecular edge that could split ceramite, and watched in horror as Spawn caught it with his bare hand. The blade didn't even scratch the necroplasmic armor. "You're just following orders," Spawn said, almost sadly. "I used to do that too. Killed a lot of people for men in suits who told me it was necessary." His grip tightened, and the combat blade shattered. "I know how this story ends." The chains moved like living things, finding gaps in power armor that shouldn't exist. They pierced. They constricted. They drained. In 45 seconds, Scout Squad Epsilon was dead. Not wounded, not unconscious. Dead. Their gene seed, the sacred biological legacy of their chapter, corrupted beyond recovery by necroplasmic contamination. Spawn stood among the bodies, feeling the weight of what he'd just done. These soldiers weren't demons. They weren't corrupt politicians or mob enforcers. They were zealots, certainly. But they believed they were protecting humanity. That made them obstacles. His costume absorbed residual energy from the slain Marines, analyzing their physiology. Enhanced strength, redundant organs, neural conditioning, genetic manipulation. His symbiote whispered insights, modified humans, mass-produced warriors, expendable. An empire built on child soldiers and religious brainwashing, Spawn muttered. Yeah, this place needs to burn. In Firebase Demetrius, alarms shrieked as Scout Squad Epsilon's life signs flatlined simultaneously. Captain Mordred stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 5 Space Marines, each a warrior capable of facing 100 mortal soldiers, dead in under a minute. All units, Mordred growled into the Vox. Converge on grid reference Epsilon 7, unknown hostile, extreme threat classification. He sealed his helmet and drew his power sword. Brothers, we face something new, something dangerous. Show it the Emperor's mercy. 30 Space Marines mobilized toward Spawn's position. Predator tanks rumbled to life. Whirlwind artillery pieces adjusted firing solutions. And in the ash wastes, Spawn looked toward the approaching army and smiled without humor. Come on then, he said to the darkness. Let's see how tough you really are. If you crave stories of cosmic collisions where unstoppable forces meet immovable empires, smash that subscribe button. The Emperor protects those who bear witness to the dark millennium. But sometimes what arrives from beyond needs no protection at all. The war for Armageddon was about to become infinitely more complicated. The Crimson Castellans descended on Spawn's position with the coordinated fury that had broken orc hordes and chaos cultist armies across a dozen worlds. Predator tanks formed a mobile firing line, their autocannons and lascannons painting target locks on the lone figure standing among the corpses of Scout Squad Epsilon. Tactical squads moved in suppression patterns, bolter fire creating overlapping kill zones that nothing should survive. Captain Mordred led from the front, as Codex Astartes' doctrine demanded. His power sword crackled with disruption field energy, capable of carving through even demon-possessed armor. Around him, 30 of the chapter's finest warriors advanced with the mechanical precision of demigods, bred for war. They opened fire at 400 meters. The ash wastes erupted in a storm of explosive rounds, laser fire, and autocannon shells. The ground where Spawn stood vanished beneath a curtain of destruction that would have leveled a city block. Smoke and debris created an impenetrable cloud, backlit by secondary explosions. Sustain fire, Mordred commanded. Do not relent. Whatever that creature is, we will reduce it to atoms. For 30 seconds, the Crimson Castellans poured enough firepower to kill a Carnifex. Then Mordred raised his fist, and the firing ceased. The smoke began to clear, carried away by Armageddon's toxic winds. Spawn walked through the dissipating cloud, completely unharmed. His cape had expanded into a massive shield of living necroplasm, absorbing and dispersing the kinetic energy of thousands of rounds. Now it contracted back to normal size, releasing absorbed energy as green fire that danced along its edges. The chains around Spawn's body writhed with anticipation, having fed on the violence directed at their master. My turn, Spawn said. He raised one hand, and the ground beneath the nearest Predator tank exploded. Not from ordnance, from necromantic power channeled through Armageddon's death-soaked soil. Skeletal hands, thousands of them, erupted from the ash and grabbed the tank's treads, its armor plating, its turret. The spirits of every soldier who had died on this battlefield answered Spawn's call, hungry for vengeance against the living. The Predator tank was dragged underground, screaming crew and all, in less than 5 seconds. Sorcery! Brother Chaplain Erasmus roared, his Crozius Arcanum blazing with power field energy. Witchcraft most foul. This is a psyker threat. All units, execute anti-psyker protocols. But Spawn wasn't a psyker. Not in any way the Imperium understood. He didn't draw power from the warp. His abilities came from something older, something that existed in the spaces between life and death. Order and chaos. The Crimson Castellans' anti-psyker training meant nothing against necromantic fury that predated their Imperium by eons. Spawn teleported. One moment he stood 400 meters away. The next, he materialized in the center of Tactical Squad Quintus. His chains lashed out in all directions simultaneously, moving faster than even Space Marine reflexes could track. They wrapped around limbs, torsos, weapons. They constricted. Power armor, ceramite plates backed by plasteel and adamantium, blessed by tech priests and inscribed with prayers to the Omnissiah, crumpled like tin foil. Brother Quintus managed to trigger his plasma pistol at point-blank range before dying. The superheated gas should have vaporized Spawn's head. Instead, his necroplasmic armor absorbed the plasma burst and converted it into raw energy, which Spawn immediately channeled into his next attack. He punched the ground. A shockwave of green fire radiated outward, carrying the accumulated death energy of 1,000 battlefields. Space Marines were thrown like ragdolls, their power armor's servos screaming in protest. 2 Predator tanks flipped end over end. The ash itself ignited, creating a ring of hellfire that burned without heat but consumed life force directly. Captain Mordred, veteran of 2 centuries, realized the truth in that moment. They were not fighting a demon or a xenos. They were fighting something that had killed demons. Something that viewed the Emperor's finest warriors as insects. Fall back to Firebase Demetrius, Mordred ordered, strategic withdrawal overriding pride. Prepare heavy ordnance. Request immediate. Spawn was in front of him. No teleportation flash. No warning. Just instant translocation that violated every physical law the Imperium understood. Mordred swung his power sword in a perfect arc, muscle memory from 10,000 training hours guiding the blade towards Spawn's neck. Spawn caught the sword between 2 fingers. The disruption field screamed as it tried to phase through solid matter and failed. Spawn's necroplasm was neither solid, liquid, nor gas. It was something else entirely. Something that existed in quantum superposition until observed, and even then refused to cooperate with reality's rules. "You're better than the others," Spawn said, studying Mordred with those burning green eyes. "You actually think. You care about your men." His grip tightened, and the power sword's energy field collapsed. "That makes this harder." "I am the Emperor's will made manifest," Mordred replied, his voice steady despite the fear coiling in his augmented hearts. "I have faced the archenemy and stood unbowed. I have." "You're a child soldier, brainwashed and mutilated to serve a dead tyrant," Spawn interrupted. His voice carried genuine sadness. "You never had a choice, did you? Taken young, indoctrinated, surgically altered until you weren't even human anymore." He released the sword and stepped back. "I know what that's like. Someone else deciding your fate." Mordred raised his bolt pistol, but his hand hesitated. Not from fear, from confusion. The creature before him spoke of the God Emperor with blasphemous contempt, yet showed something the Imperium rarely offered its enemies: understanding. "Why are you here?" Mordred demanded. "What is your purpose?" Spawn's cape billowed in the toxic wind, and for a moment, he looked less like a monster and more like a man carrying an unbearable burden. I came here because I sensed it across dimensions, Spawn said. The biggest, most concentrated source of evil I've ever felt. A galaxy where suffering is policy, where fascism is religion, where hope is heresy. His chains rattled with barely contained fury. I spent lifetimes fighting heaven and hell in my universe. Won. Killed God, killed Satan, remade reality into something better. He gestured at the ash wastes, the burning wrecks, the corpses. Then I felt this place. And I realized my war wasn't over. There's always another hell, always another system grinding people into meat for the powerful. Spawn's eyes blazed brighter. So I'm doing what I do best, Captain. I'm tearing down the machine. You speak madness, Mordred said, though uncertainty crept into his voice. The Imperium is humanity's last defense against annihilation. Without the Emperor's guidance, we would fall to chaos, to xenos extinction, to what? Freedom. Spawn laughed bitterly. You're already in hell. You're just so deep in it you think it's normal. Before Mordred could respond, a new sound cut through the battlefield. The distinctive thunder of drop pods screaming through atmosphere. Reinforcements. The Crimson Castellan's first company. Veteran Terminators bearing the chapter's most sacred relics. Spawn looked up as 10 drop pods slammed into the ash wastes with earth-shaking impacts. Assault ramps blew open with explosive charges, and from each emerged 2 Terminators clad in tactical dreadnought armor. Each warrior stood half again as tall as a normal space marine, bearing storm bolters and power fists capable of tearing through bunker walls. Brother Captain Thaddeus, 1st Company Commander, emerged last. His ancient suit of Terminator armor was a relic from the Great Crusade itself, inscribed with kill markings from campaigns spanning 3,000 years. His thunderhammer crackled with enough power to level a building with each swing. Captain Mordred, withdraw, Thaddeus commanded, his voice a rumbling bass that carried absolute authority. 1st Company will handle this abomination. Mordred wanted to argue, but discipline overrode pride. He retreated with the surviving tactical marines, leaving the Terminators to face Spawn alone. 20 Terminators formed a firing line, their storm bolters aimed with mechanical precision. Unknown entity, Thaddeus announced, his voice amplified by his armor's voxcasters. You have slain the Emperor's warriors and spoken heresy against the Golden Throne. There will be no mercy, no quarter, only death. Spawn cracked his neck, the sound carrying across the ash wastes. Funny, he said, his chains beginning to glow with gathering power. That's exactly what I was going to say to you. The Terminators opened fire. 100 rounds per second from 20 storm bolters, each round blessed by chaplains and capable of punching through tank armor. The barrage created a solid wall of explosive death. Spawn's cape transformed, expanding into something vast and terrible. No longer just a defensive shield, it became a living entity, a manifestation of the billions of souls Spawn had encountered in Hell's depths. Faces appeared in the necroplasmic fabric, screaming silently. Hands reached out, catching bolter rounds and crushing them before they could detonate. Then the cape lashed forward like a tidal wave. It crashed over the Terminator line with physical force that defied physics. Tactical dreadnought armor, designed to withstand plasma fire and power weapon strikes, crumpled under the assault. Terminators weighing half a ton each in full armor were lifted and thrown like toys. Brother Captain Thaddeus, anchored by his suit's mag-locked boots, weathered the assault and charged forward. His thunderhammer swung in a killing arc, power field blazing bright enough to leave after images. Spawn caught it with one hand. The impact crater beneath his feet spread for 20 meters. Ash vaporized. The ground cracked, but Spawn didn't move. His fingers wrapped around the hammer's haft, necroplasm flowing over the sacred weapon like corruption made visible. Strong, Spawn acknowledged, but strength isn't enough. He pulled, and Thaddeus, 3,000 years of combat experience, piloting armor that could survive orbital re-entry, was yanked off his feet like a child. Spawn's free hand pressed against the Terminator's chest plate, and necroplasmic energy poured into the armor's systems. The machine spirit inhabiting the ancient armor screamed. Not metaphorically. Spawn heard its artificial consciousness wail as his power invaded every circuit, every servo, every data line. The armor seized up, becoming a prison rather than protection. "I've fought demons wearing stolen bodies," Spawn said, his voice cold. "Your armor's got a soul trapped inside it. That's just slavery with extra steps." He tore the thunder hammer from Thaddeus's grip and threw it aside. Then, with casual brutality, he ripped the Terminator's helmet off. Thaddeus's face was revealed, scarred, augmented, with tactical data feeds implanted directly into his skull. His eyes showed no fear, only absolute conviction. "The Emperor protects," Thaddeus said, his voice steady. "No," Spawn replied. "He doesn't." Necroplasmic chains wrapped around Thaddeus, lifting him into the air. Around them, the remaining Terminators struggled to their feet, damaged but not destroyed. They raised their weapons for another assault. Spawn looked at each of them in turn, seeing past their armor to the men inside. Enhanced, indoctrinated, convinced their suffering served a higher purpose, just like he had been once, when he served men in suits who told him assassination was patriotism. "Listen to me," Spawn said, his voice amplified by necromantic power to carry across the battlefield. "I don't want to kill you. You're victims too. Your Emperor took you as children and turned you into weapons, made you believe dying for him was honor. He set Thaddeus down, but didn't release the chains. But I'm not here to save you individually. I'm here to break the system that created you. And if you get between me and that goal," the chains tightened, "I will go through you, all of you, every Space Marine, every Imperial Guard regiment, every planet." "Heresy," one Terminator whispered. "Truth," Spawn corrected. "There's a difference. You just can't see it yet." In Firebase Demetrius, Magos Explorator Hex 7 Delta watched his cogitator screens with mounting horror. The biometric feeds from First Company showed impossible readings. Terminators being defeated by a single entity, sacred armor corrupted by unknown forces, decades of tactical doctrine rendered meaningless. "Alert Inquisition," Hex 7 Delta transmitted on emergency channels. "Unknown hostile has neutralized Space Marine Rapid Response. Classification, unknown. Threat level, catastrophic." 300 kilometers above Armageddon, aboard the orbital defense station Eternal Vigilance, Inquisitor Silas Covenant received the transmission. He studied the fragmented Pict captures with the cold, analytical mind that had exposed 17 heretical cults and 3 Genestealer infestations. What he saw defied categorization. Not chaos, no warp signatures, not xenos, wrong morphology, not demon. It walked freely on consecrated ground. Something else entirely. Covenant made his decision in 3 seconds. "Prepare my Thunderhawk," he ordered his retinue. "Assemble Kill Team Obsidian. Equip sanctified ammunition and null field generators." He studied the image of Spawn standing among broken Terminators. "Whatever this thing is, it ends today." On the surface, Spawn released Brother Captain Thaddeus, who collapsed to his knees in his malfunctioning armor. "Tell your Inquisition I'm coming," Spawn said. "Tell them what happened here. Let them prepare." His eyes blazed with hellfire. "It won't matter." He stepped backward into shadows that shouldn't exist in the ash-lit wasteland and vanished, leaving only corpses and questions. The Crimson Castellans had lost 23 battle brothers. Their first company was decimated. Their understanding of the universe's rules was shattered. And somewhere in Armageddon's industrial sprawl, Spawn began his war in earnest. The hive city of Infernus sprawled across Armageddon's western continent like a metal cancer. 60 billion souls packed into hab blocks that scraped the polluted sky. In the Underhive, where the Imperium's light barely reached and law meant whatever the local gang boss said it meant, Spawn walked among the damned. He had chosen this place deliberately. Not the battlefields where space marines died gloriously. Not the orbital stations where inquisitors plotted. Here, in the rotting foundation of Imperial civilization, where the machinery of oppression ground loudest. The air was thick enough to chew. Recirculated oxygen mixed with industrial runoff, corpse starch processing fumes, and the ever-present stink of bodies pressed too close together. Flickering lumen strips cast everything in sickly yellow. Water dripped from pipes that hadn't been maintained in centuries, each drop carrying enough toxins to kill an unaugmented human. Spawn's costume analyzed the environment with growing disgust. Poison everywhere. Radiation. Chemical contamination. They live in this. "Yeah," Spawn muttered. And someone told them it's normal. He walked past a food distribution center where gaunt workers queued for their daily ration of corpse starch, recycled organic matter processed into gray paste that technically qualified as nutrition. The people didn't complain. Couldn't complain. Arbites enforcers with shock mauls watched from elevated platforms, ready to beat anyone who disrupted the Holy Emperor's efficient resource distribution. A child, maybe 8 years old, maybe 12. Malnutrition made aging difficult, stared at Spawn with hollow eyes. The boy's arms were covered in chemical burns from whatever factory employed him. His ration disc hung from a chain around his neck. Citizen 4427 Beta 997. Not a name, just a number. Spawn had seen slaves in hell with more hope in their eyes. "You hungry, kid?" Spawn asked, his voice gentler than it had been with the Space Marines. The boy's eyes widened with terror, and he scurried away into the crowd. Not because Spawn looked dangerous, though he did, but because in the Underhive, kindness was usually a prelude to violence. Charity meant debt. Debt meant ownership. Spawn felt something cold settle in his chest. Not anger. Anger was too hot, too immediate. This was the killing frost that preceded his most terrible judgments. "This whole place," he said to no one, "is a monument to suffering." A voice crackled from loudspeakers mounted throughout the Underhive, distorted by centuries of corrosion. "Citizens, remember the Emperor's wisdom. To question is to doubt. To doubt is heresy. In labor, find purpose. In obedience, find salvation. The Emperor protects." Spawn's chains rattled. "No," he said quietly. "He doesn't." 300 meters above, in the mid-hive administrative sector, Inquisitor Silas Covenant assembled his kill team in a commandeered Arbites precinct house. 6 specialists, each chosen for their ability to counter specific threats. Sister Valeria of the Adepta Sororitas, whose faith burned hot enough to banish demons. Tech Priest Auxiliary Zeta 5, whose augments could detect and disrupt forbidden technology. Interrogator Cassius, a blank whose null field disrupted psychic phenomena. And 3 veteran stormtroopers equipped with hotshot laser guns and blessed ammunition. Covenant himself was a study in controlled paranoia. 70 years of inquisitorial service had taught him that the universe contained infinite ways to die, and preparation was the only defense. His rosette gleamed on his chest, the ultimate symbol of authority in the Imperium, granting him power to condemn entire worlds. "Review the data," Covenant ordered, activating a hololith projector. Grainy picked captures from Armageddon's ash wastes appeared, showing Spawn's massacre of the Crimson Castellans. Unknown hostile. Designation: Entity Prime. Single entity neutralized 23 Adeptus Astartes, including Terminators. No warp signature detected. No xenos biomarkers identified. No known weaknesses. Sister Valeria studied the images with the tactical acumen of someone who had burned heretics across a dozen worlds. Its armor appears organic, possibly demonic manifestation. Negative? Tech Priest Zeta 5 replied, mechadendrites twitching as they processed data. Demon presence generates warp distortion measurable on standard augury equipment. This entity produces no such signature. Hypothesis: xenobiological weapon system of unknown origin. Or something worse, Covenant said. Something we have no classification for. He zoomed in on Spawn's face, those green eyes burning with hellfire. It spoke to Captain Mordred, claimed to have killed gods, stated intention to tear down the machine of Imperial rule. Interrogator Cassius, pale-skinned, dead-eyed, radiating the unsettling aura all blanks carried, spoke in a flat monotone. Heretical ideology suggests chaos corruption, but I detected no warp taint in the combat footage. Conclusion: Entity Prime operates under unknown paradigm. Standard containment protocols may prove insufficient. Then we adapt, Covenant said. Our mission is threefold. Locate the entity, determine its nature, and if possible, capture it for study. If capture proves impossible... He drew his plasma pistol. The Emperor grants us authority to do what must be done. In the Underhive, Spawn's enhanced hearing picked up approaching footsteps. Multiple contacts, moving with military precision, their equipment clanking with the characteristic rhythm of Imperial Guard or Arbites. He turned toward a side passage and found his path blocked by 30 Arbites enforcers, their shotguns and suppression shields forming a riot control line. "Halt!" The lead Arbites barked, his voice amplified by his helmet's voxcaster. "You are in violation of Underhive Travel Restriction Ordinance 447 Alpha. Present identification or be detained for processing." Spawn looked at the enforcers, each one a human being choosing to enforce laws that kept billions in perpetual suffering. Not monsters. Just people who believed the system was normal, necessary, right? "I don't have time for this," Spawn said. "Non-compliance detected." The Arbites raised their weapons. "Final warning. Submit to..." Spawn's cape lashed out, not to kill but to disarm. It wrapped around weapons and yanked them away with surgical precision. 30 shotguns clattered to the ground before the Arbites could fire a single shot. "Go home," Spawn said. "Find new jobs. This whole system is ending, and you don't want to be standing in its way when it falls." The lead Arbites reached for his shock maul, but Spawn was already moving past them, his cape deflecting the few stun batons that managed to swing. He didn't hurt them. Didn't need to. They were symptoms, not the disease. He needed to find the source. Spawn's destination was clear in his mind. The Hive's central administratum, where planetary governors issued edicts and tithes were calculated. Where bureaucrats decided which hab blocks received food and which starved. Where the machine of oppression had its gears and levers. But as he moved through the Underhive toward the lifter stations, something else caught his attention. A gathering in a collapsed section of Hab Block 774. Dozens of people clustered around a makeshift shrine, and for a moment, Spawn expected to see the Emperor's Aquila. Instead, he saw his own image. Crude drawings on scavenged metal plates showed a figure in red and black, wreathed in chains, standing over broken space marines. Someone had painted words beneath in chemical dye. "The Red Angel, he fights for us." Spawn froze. An old woman, ancient by Underhive standards, perhaps 40, knelt before the shrine, her lips moving in silent prayer. "Red Angel, who stands against the Sky Warriors, who breaks their holy armor, grant us strength. Grant us freedom. Grant us—" "Stop," Spawn said, stepping into the gathering. His voice carried command born from the hell itself. "Don't pray to me." The crowd recoiled in terror and wonder. The old woman looked up, saw Spawn standing there in the flesh, and her eyes filled with tears. You're real," she whispered. "I'm real," Spawn confirmed. "But I'm not an angel, not holy, not something you should worship." He gestured at the shrine. I'm just trying to fix this." A man stepped forward, younger, maybe 20, his face scarred from industrial accidents. "You killed Sky Warriors, the Emperor's chosen. We saw the picked feeds before the Administratum purged them. You're the first person in living memory to stand against them and survive." "They were soldiers," Spawn said, "following orders. I didn't want to kill them, but they gave me no choice." He looked at the assembled faces, seeing desperate hope mixed with fear. "I'm not here to be your savior. I'm here to break the system that made you need one." "Then you are an angel," the old woman said. "The Emperor doesn't send anyone," Spawn interrupted, his voice sharp. "Your Emperor is a corpse. Has been for 10,000 years. Whatever's keeping him technically alive is feeding on your faith, your suffering, your children's sacrifice to keep his throne powered." His chains rattled with barely contained fury. "This whole Imperium is a death cult masquerading as civilization. Heresy. Pure, undiluted heresy. Words that should have the crowd fleeing in terror or attacking him in righteous fury. Instead, the man with the scarred face laughed. A bitter, broken sound. "We know," he said quietly. "Down here, in the dark, where the priests don't come and the Arbites only visit to collect bodies. We know. The Emperor doesn't protect us. Never has." He gestured at the collapsing hab blocks, the toxic water. "The malnourished children. This is what his protection looks like." Spawn felt something shift in his perception of the 41st millennium. He had assumed everyone was brainwashed, indoctrinated, unable to see the horror they lived in. But here, in the deepest darkness, some people saw clearly. They just lacked the power to change anything. Until now. "Listen to me," Spawn said, his voice carrying to everyone in the collapsed hab block. "I can't save you individually. Can't fix your lives one by one. There are too many of you, and I'm just one person." His cape billowed, shadows dancing across the walls. "But I can break the chains, tear down the hierarchy, create space for something better to grow." "They'll kill you," the old woman said. "The Inquisition, the Space Marines. The entire Imperium will come for you." "Let them," Spawn replied. "I've fought heaven and hell and came out on top. Your Imperium is just another tyranny. Bigger, older, more entrenched. But tyranny all the same. And I'm very good at killing tyrants." A child's voice, the same boy who had fled from Spawn earlier, called out from the back of the crowd. "What do we do? When you break everything, what do we do?" Spawn looked at the boy, seeing the question behind the question. "Will you leave us in chaos? Trade one master for another? Destroy without building?" "You survive," Spawn said. "You build something better. I can't tell you what that looks like. I'm not from here, don't know your history, your cultures, but you do." He pointed at the assembled Underhivers. "When the boot lifts from your neck, you'll remember how to breathe. You'll figure out the rest." The crowd murmured, uncertainty mixing with something dangerous. Hope. Above them, in the mid-hive, Covenant's kill team received updated coordinates. Entity Prime had been spotted in the Underhive, surrounded by civilians. The Inquisitor made a decision that would have damned a lesser man, but was merely prudent for someone of his rank. "Authorize Arbites Precinct lockdown of Underhive Sector 774. Covenant ordered. "Civilian casualties are acceptable. Priority, contain and neutralize Entity Prime before heretical ideology spreads." Sister Valeria hesitated. "Inquisitor, the citizens have committed no crime. Purging them for proximity to is necessary." Covenant finished coldly. "I have seen heresy spread like plague. One conversation, one moment of doubt. Entire worlds fallen because someone showed mercy to the wrong person at the wrong time." His eyes were hard as ceramite. "We will save billions by sacrificing thousands. The Emperor demands no less." In the Underhive, Spawn's enhanced senses detected the approaching threat. Heavy equipment moving into position, blast doors sealing, oxygen pumps shutting down. They were going to suffocate the entire sector. "Everyone out," Spawn ordered, his voice cutting through the crowd's murmurs. "Now, this place is about to become a kill box." The Underhivers didn't question. They ran, decades of survival instinct overriding everything else. But Spawn knew the truth. The exits would be sealed. The Arbites would be waiting, and these people would be slaughtered to contain his presence. The Imperium's logic was simple. Better to kill the infected than risk the infection spreading. Spawn had seen that logic before. In his own world, in Black Ops missions where collateral damage was called acceptable losses, where entire villages were burned because one person might have been enemy combatant. He had participated in that logic once, followed orders, trusted his superiors knew best. Never again. Spawn's chains exploded outward, wrapping around support columns throughout the collapsed hab block. Necroplasmic energy poured into the structure's bones, reinforcing, strengthening, transforming corroded metal into something harder than adamantium. "You want to collapse this place?" Spawn said to the approaching Arbites' forces. "Come try." Above, Covenant watched his tactical display as blast doors sealed and venting protocols initiated. In 3 minutes, Sector 774 would have no breathable air. In 5, everyone inside would be dead. Entity Prime shows no signs of evacuation, Tech Priest Zeta 5 reported. Hypothesis: insufficient awareness of Imperial containment protocols. Or, Interrogator Cassius said in his flat voice, "It doesn't need to breathe." Covenant's jaw tightened. Every new data point about Entity Prime suggested something beyond standard threat classification. Not chaos, not xenos. Something genuinely alien to the Imperium's understanding of reality. "Deploy kill team," Covenant ordered. "We go in after the venting. Valeria, prepare flamers. If it doesn't need air, perhaps it can still burn." In Sector 774, Spawn stood in the center of the reinforced hab block and waited. The air was already growing thin. The Underhivers who hadn't evacuated in time gasped for breath, their unaugmented lungs failing. Spawn's cape expanded, forming a dome over the civilians. His necroplasmic armor began filtering oxygen from the very walls, creating a bubble of breathable air, while the Imperium tried to murder everyone around him. "The Red Angel protects," someone whispered. "Don't," Spawn said harshly. "Don't make me into a god. I've killed enough of those to know how it ends." But the words were already spreading through the Underhive's Vox networks, through whispered rumors and picked feed leaks, that the Administratum hadn't purged quickly enough. The Red Angel, enemy of Space Marines, protector of the Forgotten. Spawn felt the weight of expectation settling on his shoulders like his old military uniform, the one he had worn when people called him a patriot, a hero, an instrument of justice. He had learned the truth about heroes the hard way. They were created by people who needed someone else to save them. And when heroes inevitably failed because they were human, fallible, limited, the same people who elevated them tore them down. "I'm not your hero," Spawn said to the Underhivers, huddled beneath his cape. "I'm just angry, and angry is a weapon you can aim." The blast doors exploded inward, and Covenant's kill team entered Sector 7 Dalma Subniveau 4 with military precision. The Inquisitor's war against Entity Prime had officially begun. Sister Valeria entered Sector 774 with her flamer raised, pilot light casting dancing shadows across her power armor. Behind her, the kill team spread in practiced formation. Stormtroopers flanking, Tech Priest Zeta 5 scanning with augmented sensors, Interrogator Cassius radiating his unsettling null field aura. Inquisitor Covenant walked in last, plasma pistol in hand, his movements deliberate and controlled. He had executed heretics in burning cathedrals, purged Genestealer cults from mining stations, and once personally detonated a cyclonic torpedo that ended a demon prince's reign. This should have been routine. The scene before him was anything but. Spawn stood in the center of a reinforced pocket of reality, his cape forming a protective dome over approximately 200 Underhive civilians. The structural supports around him glowed with necroplasmic energy, transformed from corroded metal into something that read on Zeta 5 sensors as compositionally impossible. The air inside Spawn's protective bubble registered as breathable despite the sector's atmospheric purge. And the people, gaunt, malnourished, forgotten citizens who should have been terrified of both the kill team and the entity protecting them, looked at Spawn with something Covenant recognized immediately as worship. "Inquisitor Silas Covenant of the Ordo Xenos," Covenant announced, his voice amplified by his helmet's voxcaster. "By the authority of the God Emperor of mankind, I command you to surrender for interrogation and processing. Resist, and you will be terminated with extreme prejudice." Spawn's cape contracted, releasing the Underhivers but leaving them protected within the reinforced structure. He stepped forward, chains rattling with each movement, until he stood 10 meters from the kill team. "Inquisitor," Spawn said, tasting the word. "Fancy title for a government hitman. I used to be one of those too. Called myself a patriot while I murdered people my bosses said were threats to national security." His eyes blazed brighter. "How many innocent people have you killed because they knew too much, saw too much, questioned too much?" Covenant's expression didn't change. "In service to the Imperium, there are no innocent deaths, only necessary sacrifices. The Emperor's will—" "Stop hiding behind a corpse," Spawn interrupted. "You made those choices. You pulled those triggers. Own it." Sister Valeria's faith burned hot enough that her armor's purity seals began to smolder. "Heresy. The Emperor is eternal. His will guides us through." "Your Emperor is dead," Spawn said flatly. "Has been for 10,000 years. You're praying to a psychic battery that feeds on the souls of children. 1,000 psychers sacrificed daily, just to keep his throne's lights on. He gestured at the huddled Underhivers. How is that different from demons demanding blood sacrifice? The sacrifice is willing, Valeria replied, though something in her voice wavered. The psychers serve their children, Spawn said, his voice dropping to something cold and terrible. Rounded up, shipped in black ships, fed to a machine. Most don't even understand what's happening before they're drained dry. His chains began to glow. I've been to hell. Literally, seen its torture chambers and blood factories. Your golden throne would fit right in. Interrogator Cassius stepped forward, his null field expanding. Where it touched, reality stabilized, psychic phenomena dampened, warp energy dissipated. Even Spawn's necroplasmic aura flickered and dimmed slightly. Interesting, Cassius said in his emotionless monotone. Entity Prime shows reduced capability and proximity to null field projection. Conclusion: power source has psychic or quasi-psychic component despite absence of standard warp signature. Spawn felt it. A pulling sensation, like his necroplasm was being stretched thin by Cassius's presence. Not painful, but constraining. The blank's very existence created a dead zone in reality where supernatural power struggled to function. Smart, Spawn admitted. Bring a counter to psychic bullshit. Problem is, I'm not psychic. His cape lashed out faster than Cassius could react, wrapping around the blank's torso and lifting him off the ground. The null field intensified as Cassius's involuntary response triggered, but Spawn's necroplasm was a physical matter as much as supernatural energy. The chains tightened and Cassius gasped, a rare expression of discomfort from a man who felt nothing. Put him down, Covenant ordered, his plasma pistol aimed at Spawn's head. Or I fire. Go ahead, Spawn said. You'll vaporize his head along with mine. Worth it? The standoff held for 3 seconds. Then Tech Priest Zeta 5's mechadendrites moved with surprising speed, one appendage firing a graviton pulse directly at Spawn's cape. The exotic energy disrupted the necroplasmic structure just enough for Cassius to drop free, rolling away with military precision. Tactical analysis, Zeta 5 reported, data streams flowing across his optical implants. Entity Prime's defensive capabilities exceed preliminary estimates by 340%. Recommended response: strategic withdrawal and orbital bombardment. Denied, Covenant said. Orbital strikes would level 20 HAB blocks and kill millions. We contain this here. His eyes never left Spawn. Entity Prime, final warning. Surrender or... Spawn teleported. One moment he stood before the kill team. The next, he materialized directly behind Sister Valeria, his hand wrapping around her flamer's fuel line. A squeeze, and the pressurized promethium container crumpled. Valeria spun with enhanced reflexes, her combat knife flashing toward Spawn's throat. He caught her wrist, stopped the blade centimeters from his neck, and for a moment, they were frozen in close combat. You believe, Spawn said quietly, looking into her eyes through her helmet's visor. Really believe. It's not just indoctrination. You've seen something that convinced you the Emperor is real and watching. Valeria's response was immediate. I have felt his presence. In the heat of battle, when heretics fell before my flames, when you were killing in his name, Spawn finished. Yeah, I know that feeling too. Thought I was doing God's work back in my world. Took me death and damnation to realize I was just a weapon in someone else's holy war. He released her and stepped back. The stormtroopers fired immediately. their hot-shot last beams converging on Spawn's position. The energy weapons should have punched through armor, but Spawn's cape absorbed the shots and reflected them harmlessly into the walls. "You can't win this fight," Covenant said, his tactical mind already calculating alternatives. "Even if you kill all of us, the Inquisition is vast. We will send more teams, escalate responses. Eventually, an Exterminatus order will be issued and Armageddon will burn. Kill an entire planet to stop one person," Spawn said. "That's exactly the kind of thinking I'm here to end." "It is necessary thinking," Covenant replied. "The Imperium spans 1,000,000 worlds, billions of souls. If sacrificing one planet saves the rest, it is not just justified, it is obligatory." Spawn studied the Inquisitor, seeing not a monster, but a true believer who had made impossible choices so many times that they had become routine. A man who had stared into the abyss of chaos, xenos horrors, and human corruption and concluded that absolute control was the only defense. "You're not evil," Spawn said. "That's the worst part. You genuinely believe you're saving humanity." "I am," Covenant said simply. "By grinding them into obedient meat," Spawn countered. "By making sure no one thinks too hard, questions too much, dreams too big. You call it protection. I call it a cage." Behind them, the Underhivers watched the confrontation with bated breath. Some clutched improvised weapons, lengths of pipe, rusted blades, tools repurposed for violence. They had lived their entire lives under the Imperium's boot. Now, for the first time, they saw someone push back. "Citizens of Sector 774, Covenant announced, turning his attention to the crowd. "You are witnessing heresy, listening to blasphemy. By Imperial law, that makes you complicit." He raised his plasma pistol toward the nearest Underhiver. "Unless you demonstrate loyalty by attacking Entity Prime immediately." The Underhiver, a woman in her 30s, face scarred by chemical burns, looked at the Inquisitor, then at Spawn, then at her neighbors. 3 generations of conditioning warred with a single moment of defiance. She spat on the ground at Covenant's feet. "The Emperor's never done shit for us," she said, her voice shaking but clear. "Why should we die for him now?" It was the spark Covenant had feared. The crowd didn't attack Spawn. They didn't flee. They stood their ground, and in that moment of collective defiance, the Inquisitor saw the true threat Entity Prime represented. Not military might or psychic power, but ideology. The radical concept that the Imperium's suffering was not necessary, not inevitable, not holy, that it could be challenged. "Sister Valeria," Covenant ordered coldly, "purge the heretics." Valeria's flamer was damaged, but she had a backup, a plasma pistol at her hip. Her hand moved toward it with the mechanical certainty of someone whose faith had never truly been tested. Then she stopped. "Inquisitor," Valeria said slowly, "they are unarmed civilians. No weapons, no chaos taint detected, no xenos influence." Her hand remained on her weapon, but didn't draw it. "The Emperor's mercy extends even to..." "The Emperor's mercy is what I decree it to be." Covenant interrupted. "Draw your weapon and fire, or I will report you to your order for dereliction of duty." Spawn watched the sisters' internal struggle with grim familiarity. He had been there once, ordered to kill civilians, because command said they were enemy sympathizers. He had obeyed that order, murdered families, told himself it was necessary. That choice had damned him, literally. "Don't," Spawn said to Valeria. "Don't carry that weight. It doesn't wash off." "Enough!" Covenant aimed his plasma pistol at Spawn and fired. The superheated gas should have vaporized Spawn's head. Instead, his chains moved with liquid speed, forming a barrier that absorbed the plasma burst and converted it into raw energy. Spawn's entire body blazed with accumulated power, the sum of every attack directed at him since arriving in this universe. "You want to see what I can really do?" Spawn asked, his voice echoing with hellish resonance. "You want to understand what you're facing?" His cape expanded outward, not as a shield, but as a manifestation of his true nature. The Underhive's darkness deepened as necroplasm consumed light itself. In that darkness, shapes moved, echoes of every soul Spawn had encountered in his journey through hell, heaven, and the spaces between. The kill team saw visions. Sister Valeria witnessed angels with blood on their wings, holy warriors committing atrocities in God's name. Tech Priest Zeta 5 sensors overloaded as they tried to process data that violated causality. The stormtroopers saw their own futures, dying in wars that served no purpose, forgotten by the Imperium they served. And Covenant saw the truth he had spent 70 years avoiding, that the Imperium was not humanity's savior, but its prison warden, and he had been a loyal guard. The visions lasted 3 seconds. When they ended, the kill team stood frozen, their certainties shaken. "That's what I am," Spawn said, the darkness receding. "I'm the sum of every injustice, every abuse of power, every system that grinds people into nothing and calls it necessary. I'm what happens when someone decides to fight back." Covenant's hand trembled, the first sign of doubt he had shown in decades. You cannot be real. The Imperium has stood for 10,000 years, survived the Horus Heresy, the age of apostasy, the time of ending itself. One entity cannot... "I killed God," Spawn interrupted. "Killed Satan, remade reality. Your Imperium is big, old, and cruel, but it's not invincible." His chains rattled with promise. "And I'm just getting started." Behind him, the Underhivers began to move. Not fleeing, but spreading out, some heading for exits, while others remained. Word was already spreading through Vox channels that the Administratum hadn't shut down fast enough. The Red Angel stood against the Inquisition. The Red Angel protected the people. Myths were forming in real time. Covenant made a tactical decision. "Kill team, withdraw to checkpoint Delta. We regroup and reassess." It galled him to retreat, but his 70 years of experience recognized when a battle was unwinnable. Entity Prime, this engagement is not concluded. The full might of the Inquisition will come for me, Spawn finished. "I'm counting on it. Bring your armies. Bring your space marines. Bring your ships and your faith and your 10,000 years of accumulated brutality." His eyes blazed. "I'll be waiting." The kill team withdrew in disciplined formation, but Covenant noticed Sister Valeria glancing back at the Underhivers, at the people she had almost killed on his order. Doubt had been planted, and doubt was the enemy of faith. As they left Sector 774, Covenant activated his personal Vox, encrypted channel directly to the Ordo Xenos fortress on Armageddon's moon. "This is Inquisitor Covenant. Authorization code Omega-77, he transmitted. "I am escalating Entity Prime to Apocalypse-class threat. Recommend immediate deployment of Grey Knights and preparation of Exterminatus protocols. This is not hyperbole. We are facing something that could unravel Imperial doctrine itself." The response came in minutes. "Acknowledged. Grey Knights en route. Estimated arrival, 6 hours. The Emperor protects Inquisitor." Covenant looked at his kill team. Valeria still troubled. Zeta 5 processing impossible data. Cassius maintaining his blank expression, but with something new in his dead eyes. Even his stormtroopers moved with less certainty. 3 seconds of vision had done more damage than 1,000 sermons. In Sector 774, the Underhivers gathered around Spawn, who stood amid the wreckage of Imperial certainty. "What happens now?" the scarred woman asked. "They'll come back with more. They always come back with more." "Let them," Spawn said. "Every time they escalate, they prove my point. That the only way the Imperium knows how to handle problems is overwhelming violence." He looked at the assembled civilians. "You want freedom? It's not given, it's taken. And the first step is realizing you deserve it." The old woman from the makeshift shrine approached, her eyes wet with tears. "We've prayed to the Emperor for generations, for relief, for mercy, for anything." She touched Spawn's arm tentatively. "You're the first prayer that ever got answered." Spawn gently moved her hand away. "I'm not an answer to prayer. I'm just someone who's tired of watching people suffer because powerful men say it's necessary." His chains coiled around his arms. "Don't worship me. Don't make me into another emperor. Just survive. Build something better when I'm done tearing this down." But the seed was already planted. Across Armageddon, in hubs and factories and military installations, picked feeds circulated showing Entity Prime standing against an Inquisitor, showing Underhivers defying Imperial authority and living, showing that the Imperium's power was not absolute. Rebellion didn't need organization or planning. It just needed proof that defiance was possible. And Spawn had provided that proof. 6 hours until the Grey Knights arrived, Space Marines whose sole purpose was hunting demons and entities from beyond reality. Warriors trained in psychic combat, equipped with weapons forged to kill the unkillable. Spawn had 6 hours to prepare for his first real test in the 41st millennium. He spent them walking through the Underhive, letting people see him, letting the Imperium see him, broadcasting his presence like a challenge no authority could ignore. The war was no longer just about him versus the Imperium's military might. It was about the idea he represented, that the machine could be broken, the system could be challenged, and humanity didn't have to accept eternal suffering as the price of survival. In the Ordo Xenos fortress, Covenant watched surveillance feeds of Entity Prime's movements and felt something he hadn't experienced in decades. Genuine fear. Not for his life. He had accepted death as part of service long ago. But fear that Entity Prime might be right, that the Imperium was a prison, and he had spent 70 years as its torturer. He pushed the thought away and focused on tactical preparations. The Grey Knights would handle Entity Prime. They had to. Because if they failed, if this being genuinely could not be stopped, then the Imperium's foundation wasn't adamantium and faith. It was lies and momentum could be broken. The Grey Knights arrived in the pre-dawn darkness, their strike cruiser, Blade of Purity, translating from warp space with the precision of monks who had spent centuries perfecting the art of righteous violence. 10 warriors descended in a Thunderhawk gunship, each one a Psyker warrior, handpicked from the most mentally resilient recruits in the Imperium, trained to face demonic horrors that would shatter lesser minds. Brother Captain Alaric led them, his Nemesis Force weapon crackling with psychic energy that could cut through reality itself. His silver armor bore the scars of campaigns against demon princes, greater demons, and entities that had no names in mortal languages. He had banished 13 warp-spawned abominations personally, and each one had left marks on his soul that only faith kept from consuming him. This should have been routine. Inquisitor Covenant met them at Firebase Demetrius, now heavily fortified with prayer wards, psychic dampeners, and enough blessed ammunition to wage war against a minor demon incursion. The Inquisitor looked haggard, 6 hours without sleep, reviewing every scrap of data on Entity Prime, finding no patterns, no weaknesses, only increasingly troubling implications. "Brother Captain," Covenant greeted, making the sign of the Aquila. "Thank you for responding so swiftly." Alaric's psychic senses swept the area, reading the emotional residue of recent combat. Fear, confusion, and something more troubling, doubt. The kind of insidious uncertainty that preceded Faith's collapse. "Inquisitor," Alaric replied, his voice filtered through his helmet's vox. "Your report claims an entity capable of neutralizing Space Marines without warp signature or demonic manifestation. In 800 years of service, I have never encountered such a thing." His tone suggested skepticism. "You are certain this is not simply a particularly cunning demon?" "I wish it were," Covenant said. "Demons, I understand. This..." He activated a hololith showing Spawn's confrontation with the kill team. "This speaks ideology, philosophy. It argues rather than corrupts, and its arguments are dangerously effective." Brother Librarian Hyperion, the Grey Knight's most powerful psyker, studied the recording with his third eye. His psychic perception that pierced illusions and detected warp taint. He saw Spawn's necroplasmic armor, the chains that moved with impossible purpose, the cape that absorbed energy like a living void. And beneath it all, nothing. No warp signature, no demonic essence, no chaos corruption, just absence where something should be. "This troubles me," Hyperion admitted. "It exists in a space my sight cannot penetrate. Not because it is hidden, but because it operates under rules I do not comprehend. Then we test it with steel and faith," Alaric said. "If it bleeds, it can be killed. If it can be killed, we are sufficient to the task." He turned to his squad. "Brothers, standard demon hunting protocols. Psychic suppression, blessed ammunition, nemesis weapons. Entity Prime is classified as apocalypse threat, so we hold nothing back." The Grey Knights moved out with the coordinated precision of warriors who had fought together for centuries. Their psychic communion allowed them to operate as a single organism, each brother anticipating the other's actions, creating overlapping fields of fire and psychic barriers that could contain even greater demons. They found Spawn where Covenant surveillance had tracked him, standing atop the ruins of an old factorum in the mid-hive, silhouetted against Armageddon's polluted dawn. His cape billowed in toxic winds, and his chains hung loose, almost relaxed. He had been waiting for them. "Grey Knights," Spawn said as they approached, his voice carrying across the ruins without amplification. "Demon hunters, psychic warriors. The Imperium's answer to things that shouldn't exist." He turned to face them fully. "Funny. In my world, I was one of Hell's things that shouldn't exist. Now I'm what you send demon hunters after." "Entity Prime," Alaric announced, his nemesis sword igniting with azure psychic fire. "By the authority granted to us by the God Emperor himself, we command you to cease your blasphemy and submit to purification. You will be cleansed by blade and prayer, your essence cast into the warp to be devoured by the entities you claim to oppose." Spawn's laugh was bitter. "You think I'm a demon? I'm not. Demons are predictable. They want souls, worship, corruption. Me?" His eyes blazed brighter. "I just want to watch your empire burn." Brother Librarian Hyperion struck first, not with weapons, but with psychic assault. His mind lashed out with techniques honed over 3 centuries, psychic lances that could pierce demon prince armor, mental attacks that unraveled demonic essence, prayers that burned corruption like acid. The attack hit Spawn like a tidal wave of purifying faith, and did nothing. Hyperion staggered back, his mind recoiling from the impossible feedback. It was like trying to burn water. His psychic power found no purchase, no vulnerability, no corruption to purify. Spawn's essence wasn't demonic or even warp-touched. It was something else entirely, something that existed in a framework the Grey Knights' training had never prepared them for. "Problem?" Spawn asked, genuine curiosity in his voice. "Your psychic bullshit doesn't work on me because I'm not from here. Your warp, your demons, your chaos, that's your universe's problem. I come from somewhere else, where the rules are different." "Impossible," Hyperion gasped. "Nothing exists beyond the materium and immaterium." "There's more than you know," Spawn interrupted. "Infinite universes, infinite rules, infinite possibilities. Your Imperium is so focused on its own little war that you've forgotten the cosmos is bigger than your understanding." Brother Captain Alaric didn't waste time debating metaphysics. If psychic attacks failed, they would test blessed steel. "Brothers, assault formation." The Grey Knights charged with synchronized precision, their nemesis weapons, blessed by the Emperor himself, forged in psychic fire, consecrated against the unclean, striking in a coordinated pattern designed to overwhelm even greater demon defenses. Spawn's chains met them. The collision produced a sound like reality tearing. Nemesis force weapons that could cut through demon flesh met necroplasmic chains that had bound Hell's lords, and neither gave way cleanly. Psychic fire blazed against hellfire. Blessed steel met armor forged in damnation's furnace. The Grey Knights were the finest warriors the Imperium possessed, each one worth 1,000 normal space marines in combat against the demonic. Spawn fought them to a standstill. Brother Castiel swung his halberd in a killing arc, the blade wreathed in banishing flames. Spawn caught the weapon's shaft, and where his hand touched, the psychic flames flickered and died. Not banished, but starved of fuel. He yanked, pulling Castiel off balance, and delivered a knee strike that crumpled even Ceramite. Brother Ramiel fired his storm bolter at point-blank range, blessed ammunition that burned with holy purpose. Spawn's cape absorbed the rounds, converted them into raw energy, which he immediately channeled into his chains. They lashed out, wrapping around Ramiel's arms and legs, constricting with force that made the Grey Knight's armor groan. Brother Librarian Hyperion tried again, this time with a different approach. Not attacking Spawn's essence, but the reality around him. Psychic manipulation of the warp's interaction with physical space, creating gravity wells and vacuum pockets. Spawn stumbled, feeling the pressure, but his necroplasm adapted. It learned, evolved. By the third gravity well, he was already compensating, moving through the distorted space with predatory grace. "You're good," Spawn admitted, blocking a strike from Brother Captain Alaric's nemesis sword. "Better than most, actually making me work." His chains wrapped around Alaric's wrist, stopping the blade inches from his throat. "But you're still fighting with one hand tied behind your back." "We hold nothing back," Alaric growled, psychic energy blazing along his blade. "This is our full might." "No," Spawn said. "You're holding back your biggest weapon, your faith." He yanked Alaric closer, speaking directly into the Grey Knight's helmet sensors. "You believe the Emperor protects, that your service is holy, that dying for the Imperium is the highest honor. That faith is what makes you strong." He shoved Alaric back and gestured at the mid-hive around them. Factories churning with child labor, hab blocks collapsing from neglect, toxic air that killed unaugmented humans by age 40. "Look at what your faith protects," Spawn said. "This, endless suffering, perpetual war. Billions ground into meat for a machine that doesn't even remember why it's running." His voice dropped to something cold and terrible. "Your faith isn't making you strong, it's making you complicit." "Heresy!" Brother Castiel roared, recovering from Spawn's strike. "The Emperor's design is beyond mortal comprehension. We serve a corpse," Spawn finished. "You serve a corpse, and you know it. Deep down, where you won't let yourself think about it, you know?" The Grey Knights pressed their assault, but something had shifted. Spawn's words had found cracks in armor no physical weapon could pierce. The armor of certainty. These were warriors who had faced chaos's whispered temptations and remained pure, whose faith had been tested in ways that would break normal men. But Spawn wasn't chaos. He wasn't offering power or pleasure or freedom from morality. He was offering something more insidious. Perspective. The suggestion that their suffering in service might be meaningless. That the Imperium they died for was not humanity's salvation, but its doom. Brother Captain Alaric felt it. A tremor in his absolute faith. Not corruption, but doubt. The simple, poisonous question, what if we're wrong? He pushed it away with prayers and mental conditioning, but the seed was planted. The battle raged for 17 minutes. In that time, the Grey Knights deployed every technique in their arsenal. Psychic suppression, coordinated assault patterns, banishment rituals, prayers of cleansing. They wounded Spawn. His necroplasm sparked and flaked where Nemesis weapons struck true. But he healed faster than they could inflict lasting damage. And he was learning their patterns, adapting, becoming more efficient with each exchange. Finally, Brother Librarian Hyperion made a decision that would haunt him. "Brother Captain, we cannot win this engagement. Entity Prime is not weakening, and we have lost combat effectiveness. Request tactical withdrawal." It was the first time in Alaric's 800-year service that a Grey Knight had suggested retreat from a single enemy. "Denied," Alaric said immediately. "We are the Emperor's finest. We do not..." Spawn teleported behind Hyperion and grabbed the librarian's helmet, chains wrapping around the psychic warrior's neck. "Listen to him," Spawn said. "You're losing. Not because you're weak, but because you're fighting for the wrong reasons." He tightened his grip, not enough to kill, but enough to make Hyperion feel mortality. "Go back. Tell your Inquisition. Tell your chapter masters. Tell everyone, I'm not going away. And every time you send warriors against me, I'll beat them. Break them. Show them the cracks in their precious Imperium." He released Hyperion and stepped back. "You want to stop me? Actually try to fix what's broken. Feed the hungry, shelter the homeless. Stop grinding your people into meat." His eyes blazed. "Or keep sending armies. See which one of us runs out first." Brother Captain Alaric made the hardest decision of his life. Grey Knights, tactical withdrawal. We regroup and reassess. The Grey Knights retreated in disciplined formation. Their faith shaken, but not broken. Their certainty cracked, but not shattered. They had faced demons that screamed corruption and remained pure. But Spawn had done something worse. He had made them question without corrupting them. As they fell back to their Thunderhawk, Brother Castiel spoke quietly over Squad Vox. "Brother Captain, was that thing right? About the Emperor?" "No," Alaric said immediately, but the pause before his answer spoke volumes. We serve We protect. Our faith is... Is it faith if we're not allowed to question? Castiel pressed. The thing said... It said heresy, Alaric interrupted firmly. Words designed to weaken resolve. We will not discuss this further. But they would think about it, in quiet moments, in the spaces between prayers. The doubt would linger. Spawn watched them go, feeling no triumph. He had won the battle, but these weren't his enemies. They were victims so thoroughly conditioned, they defended their oppressors. Slaves who thought servitude was freedom. He had been there once. Would probably be there still, if death hadn't forced him to see clearly. Below, in the mid-hive, crowds had gathered to watch the confrontation. They had seen Grey Knights, legendary demon hunters, warriors who existed mostly in myth, retreat from a single figure. The impossible made manifest. The whispers became shouts. The shouts became proclamations. The Red Angel had defeated the Emperor's finest. The Red Angel could not be stopped. The Red Angel would break the chains. Spawn heard the growing fervor and felt sick. He had fought gods and refused godhood, killed angels and rejected heaven, destroyed hell and refused to rule it. Now, in this grimdark future, people were making him into exactly what he had spent lifetimes rejecting. A savior. I'm not your god, he said to the crowds below, his voice carrying across the hive. I'm not your angel. I'm just tired. Tired of watching people suffer. Tired of systems that grind and call it necessary. He looked at the faces staring up at him. Desperate, hopeful, broken. You want change? Make it yourselves. I'll break the machine, but you have to build what comes after. But revolutions don't work on reason. They work on symbols. And Spawn had become a symbol of defiance, of resistance, of the impossible idea that the Imperium could be challenged. In Firebase Demetrius, Inquisitor Covenant received reports of the Grey Knights' withdrawal with mounting dread. If the Emperor's demon hunters could not stop Entity Prime, what could? His hand moved to his personal Vox, encrypted channel to the Segmentum command. This is Inquisitor Silas Covenant, authorization Omega 77, he transmitted. Grey Knights have failed to neutralize Entity Prime. I am escalating to Code Vermilion. Recommend immediate Exterminatus authorization for Armageddon. The response took 5 minutes. 5 minutes where Covenant stared at surveillance feeds of crowds gathering around Entity Prime. Crowds that were no longer afraid, that were beginning to believe defiance was possible. Request acknowledged, Inquisitor. Exterminatus fleet en route. Estimated arrival, 18 hours. The Emperor protects. Covenant closed the channel and sat in silence. In 18 hours, Armageddon would burn. 60 billion souls would die. An entire world sacrificed to stop one entity. And the worst part was, he knew it was the right choice. Because Entity Prime wasn't just killing Imperial warriors, it was killing Imperial certainty. And that was more dangerous than any demon. On the Factorum ruins, Spawn felt the shift in the air, the electromagnetic taste of massive ships translating from warp space, the buildup of energy that preceded orbital weapons deployment. They were going to sterilize the planet, kill everyone to stop him. Standard operating procedure for the Imperium. If you can't control something, destroy it, and everything around it, and anyone who might remember it. Spawn's chains rattled with fury. All right, he said to the darkness. You want to play Extinction? Let's play. For the first time since arriving in the 41st millennium, Spawn prepared to use his full power, not the measured responses he had shown the Space Marines and Grey Knights. not the restrained demonstrations he had used to protect Underhivers. Everything. If the Imperium wanted apocalypse, he would show them what that word really meant. The Exterminatus fleet translated from warp space like judgment made manifest. 3 lunar-class cruisers, a Mars-class battlecruiser, and the dreadnought Fist of Retribution. Each vessel a cathedral of destruction capable of scouring worlds clean of life. Admiral Kraus commanded from the Fist's bridge, a veteran of 30 Exterminatus operations who had learned to view planetary annihilation as simple mathematics. Billions sacrificed to save trillions. He received Inquisitor Covenant's authorization codes and confirmed target acquisition. Armageddon, specifically the region surrounding Entity Prime's last known location. Cyclonic torpedoes armed, the weapon officer reported. Targeting solutions locked, awaiting your command, Admiral. Kraus studied the tactical display showing Armageddon's sprawling hive cities. Its perpetual war zones, its 60 billion inhabitants going about their miserable lives, completely unaware they had 18 hours to live. He felt nothing. This was duty. Maintain holding position, Kraus ordered. We give the Inquisitor his full 18 hours for evacuation protocols. Then we cleanse this world in the Emperor's name. But on Armageddon's surface, Spawn had no intention of waiting. He stood atop the mid-hive's highest spire, his enhanced senses detecting the fleet's arrival through electromagnetic disturbances and gravitational shifts. His necroplasmic armor rippled with anticipation, chains coiling tighter around his body as he prepared for the greatest display of power since his apotheosis in his home universe. Around the spire's base, hundreds of thousands of Underhivers, mid-hive workers, and even some lower-rank Imperial guard had gathered. Word had spread through every Vox channel the Administratum couldn't shut down fast enough. The Red Angel was making a stand. The Red Angel would protect them. Spawn looked down at the masses and felt the weight of their desperate hope like chains, heavier than any he wore. I told you not to worship me, he said, his voice carrying across the crowd through necroplasmic amplification. Told you I'm not your savior. Then what are you? Someone shouted from the crowd, a voice raw with desperation and defiance. Spawn was silent for a long moment, then answered with brutal honesty. I'm angry, that's all. Just someone who's seen too much suffering and decided to do something about it, even if it's the wrong thing. He turned his gaze skyward, toward the fleet invisible beyond Armageddon's polluted atmosphere, but present in his enhanced awareness like a weight pressing down on reality itself. They're going to drop bombs that burn atmospheres and crack continents, Spawn announced. Kill everyone on this planet to stop me. That's their answer to problems, overwhelming destruction. It's what they've done for 10,000 years. The crowd stirred, fear rippling through them like wind through grain. But here's what they don't know, Spawn continued, his cape beginning to expand outward, growing larger than should be physically possible. I didn't just fight hell in my universe. I absorbed it, took its power, remade it. His chains began to glow with accumulated energy from every battle since his arrival. And hell's biggest trick wasn't torture or corruption. It was making spaces bigger on the inside than the outside. His cape spread across the sky like a living storm cloud, covering kilometers in seconds, blocking out Armageddon's dim sun entirely. The necroplasmic fabric formed a dome over the entire hive city, a structure that existed partially in physical space and partially in dimensions the Imperium had no names for. In Firebase Demetrius, every auger array screamed warnings. Magos Explorador Hex 7. Delta watched his sensors register impossibilities, spatial distortions on continental scale, energy readings that exceeded his equipment's measurement capacity, gravitational anomalies that suggested localized reality failure. Inquisitor, Hex 7 Delta reported, his voice distorted by static and disbelief. Entity Prime is generating a defensive structure around Hive Infernus. Estimated coverage, 1,200 square kilometers. Estimated shielding capacity. He paused, recalculating 3 times. Unknown. Exceeds all projections. Covenant stared at the picked feeds showing Spawn's cape transforming into something that looked less like armor and more like a new sky. A crimson ceiling covering millions of souls, pulsing with eerie life. Emperor, preserve us, Covenant whispered. It's not just defending itself. It's defending the entire population. Sister Valeria, still part of Covenant's retinue despite her wavering faith, spoke quietly. Inquisitor, if it can truly shield the Hive from Exterminatus, does that not suggest it genuinely seeks to protect these people? That its intentions might not be. Its intentions are irrelevant. Covenant snapped, but his voice lacked conviction. It spreads heresy, undermines Imperial authority, causes doubt in the faithful. He gestured at the picked feeds. This display will only encourage more rebellion. Perhaps rebellion is warranted, Valeria said, so quietly only Covenant heard. The Inquisitor turned to face her, seeing in her eyes the same doubt that had infected Brother Captain Alaric's Grey Knights. Entity Prime wasn't corrupting people. It was revealing corruption already present, shining light on cracks in faith that decades of prayer had merely papered over. Sister Valeria, Covenant said carefully, you are dangerously close to heresy. I know, Valeria replied, but I am also dangerously close to honesty. Aboard the Fist of Retribution, Admiral Kraus watched Spawn's defensive structure complete itself and realized the tactical situation had fundamentally changed. Cyclonic torpedoes relied on atmospheric ignition and tectonic destabilization. If Entity Prime's shield could prevent those effects from reaching the surface. Weapon solutions are compromised, his tactical officer reported. The entity's defensive structure exists partially outside normal space. Our targeting systems cannot achieve reliable locks. Then we fire manually, Kraus said. Saturate the area with enough ordnance that even exotic shielding fails. Prepare full broadside, all weapons. Admiral, that volume of fire will ensure completion of our mission, Kraus interrupted. The Inquisition has authorized Exterminatus. We will deliver it. Below, Spawn felt the fleet's weapons charging. Massive capacitors building energy, torpedo tubes flooding with munitions, lance batteries aligning for coordinated strike. He had perhaps 10 minutes before the bombardment began. 10 minutes to prove he could protect an entire world from the Imperium's wrath. His necroplasm spread thinner, covering more area but maintaining density through quantum manipulation that made mockery of conservation laws. The Cape Dome became a second sky, one that breathed with purpose and pulsed with absorbed life energy from every death that had occurred on Armageddon since the planet's colonization. And there had been many, many deaths. You want to kill a world? Spawn said, his voice echoing across Armageddon through the necroplasmic dome. Come try, but know this. Every weapon you fire, I'll catch. Every bomb you drop, I'll absorb. And when I'm done catching, his eyes blazed with hellfire bright enough to see from orbit. I'm coming for your ships. The bombardment began. 3 cyclonic torpedoes launched first, each one a miniature apocalypse, designed to burrow into a planet's crust before detonating with force enough to crack tectonic plates. They screamed through space at relativistic speeds, their warheads blessed by tech priests and consecrated in the Emperor's name. Spawn's cape reached upward, portions of it phasing through atmospheric layers to intercept the torpedoes in low orbit. Necroplasmic tendrils wrapped around the warheads, and for a moment the outcome hung in balance. World-killing weapons versus armor forged in damnation's fires. The torpedoes detonated. The explosions lit Armageddon's sky like 3 newborn suns, visible across the entire planet. The force should have incinerated everything within a 1,000-kilometer radius. Instead, Spawn's cape absorbed the detonations, converting nuclear fire into raw energy that flowed back through the necroplasmic network into his body. He had caught 3 apocalypse weapons and eaten them. "More," Spawn said, his voice now carrying the resonance of absorbed destruction. "Give me more." Admiral Kraus watched the impossible with the detached horror of a man whose entire tactical doctrine had just become obsolete. All ships, fire at will. Lance strikes, macro cannons, missiles, everything. Overwhelm its defensive capacity through sheer volume. The fleet unleashed hell. 12 lance beams, coherent light capable of punching through fortress walls, converged on Spawn's position. Macro cannon shells the size of hab blocks rained down by the hundreds. Plasma torpedoes drew burning trails across the sky. The bombardment generated enough energy to power a hive city for decades, all focused on killing one entity. Spawn's cape intercepted everything. Lance beams struck the necroplasmic barrier and were refracted, their energy dispersed harmlessly across a vast area. Macro cannon shells were caught mid-flight and dissolved, their explosive potential consumed. Plasma torpedoes exploded against the dome like rain against glass, spectacular but ineffective. With each impact, Spawn grew stronger. His necroplasm fed on violence, turning weapons into fuel. The Imperium's greatest strength, its capacity for overwhelming destruction, had become his power source. "Thank you," Spawn said, his voice now carrying enough volume to be heard even in the fleet's bridges through Vox interference. "Every shot you fire makes me stronger. Every bomb you drop gives me more ammunition. You're literally feeding me the tools to destroy you." Kraus felt sweat on his brow for the first time in 30 years of service. "Cease fire," he ordered. "Weapons hold." His tactical mind was already calculating alternatives, but every scenario ended the same way. They couldn't kill Entity Prime from orbit, and they couldn't risk a ground assault after what it did to the Grey Knights. "Admiral," his communications officer said, "we're receiving a transmission from Entity Prime, audio only. It's addressing you personally." Kraus wanted to refuse, but inquisitorial protocol demanded intelligence gathering. "Put it through." Spawn's voice filled the fist of Retribution's bridge. "Admiral Kraus, 30 Exterminatus operations, billions of deaths on your command. You sleep fine at night because you've convinced yourself it's necessary mathematics. Some die so more survive." Kraus's jaw tightened. "How do you know?" "I've met hundreds like you," Spawn continued. "Men who make terrible choices and call it duty, who commit atrocities and call it sacrifice." His voice softened slightly. "You're not evil, Admiral. You're just a cog in an evil machine. And right now, that machine is trying to kill 60 billion people to stop one person who dared to question its authority." "Entity Prime," Kraus replied, his voice steady. "You have disrupted Imperial operations, killed the Emperor's warriors, and spread heretical ideology. Standard protocol says to burn the planet," Spawn finished. "I know, that's the problem. Your standard protocol for everything is overwhelming violence. 1,000 worlds burned, rather than let one heretic speak. 1 billion souls sacrificed rather than admit the system might be wrong. Kraus looked at his command throne, at the decades of commendations displayed on his uniform, at the faces of his bridge crew who trusted his leadership. What would you have us do? The Imperium is all that stands between humanity and extinction. Chaos would consume us. Xenos would destroy us. Without absolute order, you'd have to trust your own people to be strong enough to handle freedom, Spawn said. And that terrifies you more than any demon. Silence on the bridge. Because Spawn was right. The Imperium's greatest fear wasn't external threats. It was internal collapse. The possibility that humanity didn't need the Emperor's iron fist, that 10,000 years of suffering had been unnecessary. I'm giving you one chance, Admiral, Spawn said. Withdraw your fleet. Tell the Inquisition that Exterminatus won't work. Let me finish what I started, not destroying humanity, but destroying the system that's grinding humanity into meat. And if I refuse? Kraus asked. Then I stop catching your weapons and start sending them back. It wasn't a bluff. Spawn's necroplasmic dome pulsed with absorbed energy from the fleet's bombardment, enough destructive potential to cripple multiple ships if redirected. Kraus made his decision in 3 seconds. Fleet Command, full retreat. Disengage from Armageddon space. Mark Entity Prime as Omega-level threat. Conventional weapons ineffective. Admiral, his tactical officer protested. The Inquisitor's authorization is based on tactical assumptions now proven false, Kraus interrupted. We cannot complete the mission. Withdrawing to preserve fleet assets for future engagement is sound Imperial doctrine. His eyes never left the tactical display showing Spawn's dome. We will return with different weapons, different strategies. But today we cannot win. The Exterminatus fleet withdrew, their engines burning hard for warp translation distance. On Armageddon, 60 billion souls who had been hours from death watched their would-be executioners flee. The impossible had occurred. One entity had forced the Imperium's military might to retreat. The machine could be defied. The system could be resisted. Rebellion's spark became a flame. Spawn released his necroplasmic dome, the cape contracting back to normal size as absorbed energy dissipated. He felt exhausted, not physically, but spiritually. He had saved millions today. But for what? So they could continue suffering under slightly different masters? So they could replace one tyranny with another? I'm not your savior, Spawn said again, but his voice carried no conviction now. Below, the crowds cheered. They called his name. They painted his image on walls and sang songs about the Red Angel who defied heaven's wrath. They made him into exactly what he had spent lifetimes refusing to become: a god. And in the shadows of the Underhive, in the darkness between Imperial oversight, people began organizing. Not in worship of Spawn, but inspired by him. If one being could stand against the Imperium and survive, perhaps humanity could too. The revolution was no longer theoretical. It had begun. The rebellion spread like necrosis through flesh. Slow at first, then catastrophically fast. Within 72 hours of the Exterminatus fleet's retreat, 17 hive cities on Armageddon reported civil unrest. The Administratum's sanitized language couldn't hide the truth. Full-scale insurrection. Workers abandoned factory lines. Imperial Guard regiments refused orders to fire on civilians. Arbites enforcers found their precincts surrounded by crowds who no longer feared shock mauls and shotguns. The carefully maintained balance of oppression and compliance that had sustained the Imperium for 10 millennia was collapsing. And the spark was a single image, broadcast across every unsecured Vox channel. Spawn standing beneath a shield that had caught the Emperor's wrath and survived. But revolutions, Spawn knew from bitter experience, devoured their own children. He walked through Hive Infernus's mid-levels, watching the chaos unfold with growing unease. A crowd had dragged an administratum clerk from his office and beaten him to death in the street. Not for crimes, but for wearing Imperial insignia. A shrine to the Emperor burned, its priest murdered by the same people who had prayed there days before. Looters smashed into corpse-starch distribution centers, hoarding food while others starved. This isn't liberation, Spawn muttered, his chains rattling with frustration. This is just violence with a new target. A young man, couldn't be older than 20, face scarred from gang warfare, approached Spawn with the fervent intensity of a convert. He wore crude armor painted with Spawn's red and black colors and carried a stolen autogun. "Red Angel," the man said, making a gesture that looked disturbingly like a religious salute. "We've taken 3 Arbites precincts and a guard armory. The oppressors are falling. By your example, we—" "Stop," Spawn said, his voice cutting through the man's enthusiasm like a blade. "What's your name?" The man blinked, confused by the question. Kellen. Kellen Vrost." "Kellen, did you kill anyone today?" Pride and shame warred on Kellen's face. "2 Arbites. They were they shooting at you? Threatening civilians?" "No, they were retreating. But they were symbols of... They were people," Spawn interrupted, his eyes blazing with controlled fury. "Following orders, wearing uniforms, but still people. You executed them because they represented a system you hate." He stepped closer, and Kellen instinctively backed away from the barely contained violence in Spawn's posture. "That's not revolution. That's just revenge wearing revolutionary colors." "But you killed Space Marines," Kellen protested. "You destroyed the Imperium's warriors." "I killed soldiers who were trying to kill me," Spawn corrected. "I fought back. That's different from hunting down everyone who wore the wrong uniform." His chains coiled tighter around his arms. "I came here to break a system, not to start a bloodbath where everyone with Imperial connections gets murdered in the streets." Kellen's face flushed with anger and confusion, the dangerous cocked mixture of a true believer confronted with his idol's disapproval. "Then what should we do? Just forgive them? Let the people who ground us into meat for generations walk away?" "I don't know," Spawn admitted, and the honesty in his voice was more devastating than any rebuke. "I know how to fight, how to kill, how to tear things down. But building something better?" He looked at the burning shrine, the looted buildings, the corpses in the street. "That's not my skill set." "Then guide us," Kellen said desperately. "Tell us what to do. You're the Red Angel, "I'm not an angel," Spawn said, his voice dropping to something cold. "I'm a dead man who made a deal with hell and spent centuries regretting it. I've killed gods and destroyed heaven and remade reality, and you know what I learned?" He grabbed Kellen by his improvised armor and lifted him to eye level. "That every revolution eventually becomes the thing it overthrew. The oppressed become oppressors. The liberators become tyrants. It's a cycle, and I don't know how to break it." He released Kellen and turned away. "So, no, I won't guide you. Won't tell you what to do. You're free now. Free to make your own mistakes, build your own future, create your own nightmares." His cape billowed. "Just don't do it in my name." Spawn walked away, leaving Kellen staring after him with the bewildered expression of someone whose faith had been shattered not by contradiction, but by honesty. 3 kilometers away, in a commandeered administratum building, a different kind of revolution was taking shape. The scarred woman who had defied Inquisitor Covenant, her name was Mara Coast, had become an inadvertent leader through simple competence. While others rioted and burned, she organized. "We need food distribution networks that don't rely on Imperial supply chains," Mara said to the assembled group. Former workers, ex-guard, even a few low-ranking tech priests who had seen the Mechanicus' hypocrisy and walked away. "We need medical care, sanitation, basic infrastructure. Revolution's useless if we all die of plague in 3 months." "The Red Angel will protect us," someone said from the crowd. "The Red Angel explicitly told us not to rely on him," Mara countered sharply. She had been present when Spawn made his declaration, had heard the exhaustion in his voice. "He's a weapon, not a solution. He can break the Imperium, but he can't run sewage treatment or organize food supplies. That's on us." A former administratum clerk, one who had secretly siphoned resources to Underhive communities for years, spoke up. "The Imperial systems are collapsing, but the infrastructure remains. If we can secure the water reclamation facilities and power generators before complete chaos, then we have bargaining power with the other Hive cities," Mara finished. She looked at her improvised council, seeing desperation mixed with determination. "We're not fighting for revenge. We're fighting for the chance to build something that doesn't grind people into meat. That means being better than the Imperium, not just different." It was a fragile beginning, but it was beginning nonetheless. Spawn, wandering the Hive's mid-levels, didn't know about Mara's counsel. He was focused on a different problem. The warp was responding to Armageddon's chaos. His enhanced senses detected it first. A thinning of reality's membrane, the immaterium pressing against the material universe like infection against a wound. The Imperium's faith in the Emperor had been a psychic structure, and as that faith crumbled, the barriers it maintained weakened. Chaos was coming. Not the crude demon worship or cultist corruption he had seen in intelligence reports, but something worse: opportunistic predation. The warp's entities sensed Armageddon's turmoil like sharks sensing blood, and they were circling. Spawn felt them probing, coordinate entities attracted to the violence, Tsinchian demons feeding on uncertainty, Nurglite manifestations drawn to despair. They hadn't breached reality yet, but they would. Soon. "Of course," Spawn said bitterly. "Break one system, open the door for something worse." He had seen this before in his own universe: Hell's power vacuums filled by new demons, Heaven's collapse leading to angelic civil war. The cosmos abhorred empty thrones and rushed to fill them with whatever hungry entities were nearest. A warp rift tore open 300 meters ahead, a small breach, barely 10 meters across, but enough. A single bloodletter of corn stumbled through, its brass-bound form reeking of violence and blood. The demon's blade dripped with impossible fire, and its bestial eyes fixed on Spawn with predatory recognition. "Blood for the blood god!" The bloodletter roared, charging with the single-minded fury of Khorne's warriors. Spawn's chains intercepted it mid-charge, wrapping around the demon's limbs and torso with practiced precision. The bloodletter thrashed, its blade cutting through necroplasm. But Spawn's armor regenerated faster than the demon could damage it. "You're not even the real problem," Spawn said, studying the bloodletter with cold analytical detachment. "You're a symptom. The Imperium's faith kept you out, and now that faith is crumbling." He tightened the chains, and the bloodletter screamed, not in pain, but in fury at being restrained. Spawn's necroplasm poured into the demon's essence, not corrupting it, but consuming it. The bloodletter dissolved, its energy absorbed, its existence in real space terminated. But 3 more warp rifts opened across the hive, then 7 more, then 20. Spawn realized the terrible truth. His revolution had weakened the psychic barriers that kept chaos at bay. Every person who stopped believing in the Emperor's protection created a tiny gap in reality's defenses. Multiply that by millions across an entire hive world, and the cumulative effect was catastrophic. He had broken the Imperium's chains and opened the door to literal hell. "God damn it," Spawn snarled, teleporting toward the nearest major breach, a 30-meter rift vomiting pink horrors into a hab block. His arrival scattered the lesser demons, but more kept coming. This is why I hate metaphysics. Break one cosmic rule, and a dozen others come unraveled. He fought with brutal efficiency, chains and cape working in concert to banish demons faster than they could manifest. But there were too many breaches, spread across too much area. Even with his power, he couldn't be everywhere simultaneously. The civilians caught in the demon attack screamed for help. Some called for the Emperor's protection, old habits dying hard. Others called for the Red Angel. And Spawn, fighting plague bearers in a collapsed transit tunnel, heard both prayers and felt them like accusations. The Emperor had never answered. Spawn couldn't answer either. Not all of them, not fast enough. People were dying because he had broken the system without understanding what that system had been containing. In the Ordo Malleus fortress, orbiting Armageddon, the demon-hunting branch of the Inquisition, Grand Master Voldus of the Grey Knights received reports of the demon breaches with grim satisfaction mixed with horror. Horror at the scale of the incursion. Satisfaction that Entity Prime had finally revealed the consequences of its heresy. "The Entity has weakened the Emperor's protection," Voldus said to his assembled brother captains. "Its rebellion has created the exact chaos the Imperium's order prevents. We were correct to oppose it." Brother Captain Alaric, still troubled by his previous encounter with Spawn, spoke carefully. "Grand Master, Entity Prime is currently engaged in banishing the demons. It fights on behalf of the civilians, not alongside the Chaos forces." "Irrelevant," Voldus replied. "Whether intentional or not, its actions have enabled this incursion. The Emperor's order, which Entity Prime calls oppression, is all that stands between humanity and demonic predation." His eyes, old even for a space marine, having witnessed 3 centuries of Chaos's horrors, held no doubt. "We will cleanse Armageddon of both demon and revolutionary. Grey Knights, prepare for planetary deployment." But even as Voldus issued his orders, he felt a tremor of uncertainty. Entity Prime had defeated his finest warriors once already. Could they truly prevail in a 3-way war? Grey Knights versus demons versus an entity that had proven capable of fighting both? On Armageddon's surface, Spawn stood atop a mountain of banished demon corpses, his necroplasm saturated with absorbed warp energy, and faced a terrible choice. He could leave, tear open a dimensional portal and return to his own universe, let the 41st millennium sort out its own problems. He had tried to help and made things worse, a familiar pattern from his own world's history. Or he could stay and fight an endless war against chaos, incursions his rebellion had enabled, becoming the very thing he hated. A cosmic enforcer keeping order through violence. Or, "There's always a third option," Spawn said aloud, an idea forming that was either brilliant or suicidally stupid. If the Imperium's faith kept chaos out, and that faith is collapsing, then something else needs to replace it. Not worship of the Emperor, not worship of me. His chains began to glow as he channeled necroplasmic energy in ways he had never attempted. But what if humanity could protect itself? Actually channel psychic power without Imperial dogma or chaos corruption? It was an insane gambit. Try to teach humans to use warp energy safely, without the Imperium's infrastructure or the Golden Throne's containment. Every Inquisitor in the galaxy would scream that such a thing was impossible. Uncontrolled psychers always fell to chaos or exploded in demonic possession. But Spawn had rewritten cosmic rules before, remade heaven and hell into something new. If he could do it in his own universe? A massive warp rift tore open above Hive Infernus, not the small breaches he had been closing, but a true portal, wide enough for a greater daemon to manifest. Spawn felt the entity on the other side, powerful, ancient, calculating. Not the mindless fury of Khorne or the diseased persistence of Nurgle. This was Tzeentchian, a demon of the architect of fate, drawn by the unprecedented opportunity Armageddon's chaos represented. A lord of change stepped through the portal, its crystalline feathers refracting impossible colors, its knowing eyes studying Spawn with academic curiosity. "Ah," the Lord of Change said, its voice like breaking glass in prophecy. "The anomaly, the entity from beyond. How delicious. A being who has remade cosmic order, confronting a universe where order and chaos are eternally locked in war." It spread wings that cast shadows, containing alternate futures. "I am Kairos Fate Weaver's lesser cousin, and I come with a proposition." "Not interested in deals with demons," Spawn said, his chains ready to strike. "Not a deal," the Lord of Change replied. "An observation. You seek to free humanity from the Imperium's chains, yes? But you've discovered that freedom without structure invites predation. We of Tzeentch appreciate such paradoxes. They're our bread and butter, you might say. Get to the point before I banish you back to whatever nightmare dimension you crawled from." The demon laughed, a sound like shattering mathematics. "The point, dear anomaly, is that you cannot win. Destroy the Imperium, and chaos consumes humanity. Strengthen the Imperium, and humanity remains enslaved. There is no third option. The 41st millennium has spent 10,000 years proving that." Spawn studied the demon, recognizing manipulation, but also uncomfortable truth. The Lord of Change wasn't lying. It was presenting a genuine dilemma that had no solution within the 41st millennium's existing framework. "You're right," Spawn admitted. "Within your universe's rules, there's no answer. The system's built to make freedom and safety mutually exclusive." "Then you concede." "So I'll change the rules," Spawn interrupted. His cape expanded, not defensively, but creatively. Necroplasmic energy weaving patterns in reality that made the Lord of Change's many eyes widen with recognition. "I've done it before. I'll do it again. Your precious cosmic balance, order versus chaos, Imperium versus warp, isn't inevitable. It's just what you're all used to." The Lord of Change's expression shifted from amusement to concern. "You cannot simply rewrite." Spawn's chains lashed out, wrapping around the greater demon with speed that transcended physical movement. "Watch me." What happened next would be remembered in Tzeentchian lore as the impossible banishment. Spawn didn't just destroy or dismiss the Lord of Change. He unraveled the demon's connection to the warp itself, severing the threads that bound it to Tzeentch's realm, then absorbed its essence and converted it into something new. Pure psychic energy without chaos corruption. The Lord of Change ceased to exist, not banished, but transformed, and the process sent ripples through the warp itself. For 3 seconds, every psyker on Armageddon felt it. A moment of clarity, a glimpse of possibility where the warp's energy could be touched without corruption, where psychic power didn't automatically equal damnation. 3 seconds wasn't enough to change anything, but it was enough to prove it was possible. Spawn stood in the aftermath, his necroplasm crackling with converted demon energy, and made his decision. He couldn't leave Armageddon to burn, couldn't abandon the revolution he had started, couldn't let the Imperium or Chaos have this world. He would fight a war on 3 fronts, against the Imperium's tyranny, against Chaos's predation, and against time itself as he tried to forge a third path before either enemy crushed the fragile revolution. It was, objectively, impossible. But Spawn had built his entire existence on making the impossible kneel. "All right," he said to the burning city, to the approaching Grey Knights fleet, to the circling demons, to the chaos his actions had unleashed. "Let's see if I can actually fix what I broke." Above, Grandmaster Voldis's Grey Knights fleet entered orbit, ready for full planetary deployment. Below, Mara Coast's makeshift council tried to organize survival amid apocalypse. In the warp, the Chaos God's attention focused fully on Armageddon. Recognizing that something unprecedented was occurring, not just another rebellion or demon incursion, but a genuine threat to the cosmic status quo. And in the Materium, Spawn prepared to attempt something that would either revolutionize the 41st millennium or doom it entirely. Teaching humanity to save itself, the Grey Knights descended like silver rain. 50 Terminators, 100 power-armored battle brothers, and Grandmaster Voldis himself, his ancient armor inscribed with the names of 600 banished greater demons. They teleported directly into Hive Infernus's central plaza, their arrival announced by the distinctive thunder of matter displacement and the psychic pressure of 50 psyker warriors manifesting simultaneously. Spawn was waiting for them. He stood in the center of the plaza, surrounded by the evidence of his 3-day war. Demon corpses dissolving into warp stuff, scorch marks from banished entities, and approximately 3,000 civilians who had refused to evacuate despite the danger. They formed a living barrier between Spawn and the Grey Knights, unarmed but defiant. "Grandmaster Voldis," Spawn said, recognizing the warrior's ornate armor from psychic resonance alone. "Let me guess. You're here to kill me and everyone who's seen me. Standard Imperial protocol for things you don't understand." Voldis's voice carried the weight of 3 centuries fighting demons. "Entity Prime, you have weakened the Emperor's protection and enabled demonic incursion on catastrophic scale. 12,000 civilians dead from chaos predation in 72 hours. That blood is on your hands." "I know," Spawn replied, and the admission carried genuine pain. "I broke the system without understanding what it was containing. Made things worse trying to make them better. You think that doesn't keep me up at night? Then surrender," Voldis said. "Allow us to contain you, study you, perhaps find a way to reverse the damage your presence has caused. This is your one opportunity for mercy." Spawn looked at the civilians surrounding him. Mara Coast, prominent among them, her scarred face set with determination. He saw Kellen Vrost, the young revolutionary he had rebuked, standing with stolen autogun ready. He saw the old woman who had built the first shrine, now holding a length of pipe like a weapon. They were ready to die for him, ready to throw themselves at the Emperor's finest warriors because he had shown them defiance was possible. It made him sick. "No mercy," Spawn said. "Not surrender. But I'm going to offer you something the Imperium never offers anyone. A choice." His chains began to glow, but not with hostility, with gathered power of a different kind. You can fight me. Kill these people. Probably kill me too, eventually, if you're willing to accept enough casualties. Maintain the status quo through violence like the Imperium always does. Or, Voldis asked, his psychic senses detecting something unprecedented in Spawn's energy signature. Or you can give me 72 hours to prove there's another way, Spawn said. I've been banishing demons for 3 days, learning how chaos works in your universe. I think I can do something about the breaches. Not by restoring the Emperor's protection, but by teaching humans to protect themselves. Brother Librarian Hyperion, standing at Voldis's side, spoke with his usual analytical precision. Impossible. Unsanctioned psychers either explode from uncontrolled power, fall to demonic possession, or both. The Emperor's infrastructure, the black ships, the Astronomicon, the sanctioning rituals exist because uncontrolled psychic expression is universally fatal. In your framework, yes, Spawn agreed. But I don't operate in your framework. I've channeled power from hell, heaven, and the spaces between without corruption. I've absorbed demon essence and converted it into clean energy. He gestured at the civilians. What if I could teach them to do something similar? Not to become powerful psychers, but to collectively reinforce reality against warp intrusion. Heresy, one of the Grey Knights muttered. Probably, Spawn admitted, but also maybe necessary. Your Imperium kept chaos out through faith in the Emperor. That faith is breaking. So either you help me build a new defense, or you watch this entire world fall to demons while you're busy killing me. Voldis made tactical calculations at superhuman speed. Entity Prime was correct. The demonic incursions were escalating. Every hour they spent fighting each other was another hour chaos gained foothold. And if Entity Prime could truly do what it claimed. You're asking me to trust you, Voldis said. A being who has killed the Emperor's warriors and spread heresy across Armageddon. Why would I possibly? Because you've seen the alternative, Spawn interrupted. 3 days ago, an Exterminatus fleet tried to burn this world. They failed because I stopped them. Now demons are doing the job the Imperium couldn't. You're about to lose Armageddon either way, to me, to chaos, or to cyclonic torpedoes round 2. His eyes blazed. Or you can take a risk on something new, something the Imperium's never tried because it challenges your doctrine. The plaza held its breath. 3,000 civilians, 50 Grey Knights, and one entity from beyond facing a decision that would determine Armageddon's fate. Voldis knew that trusting Entity Prime violated every protocol he had learned in 3 centuries of service. Knew that the Inquisition would condemn him for even considering it. Knew that failure would doom not just Armageddon, but his entire chapter's honor. But he also knew, with the certainty of someone who had fought demons for 300 years, that they were losing. The warp breaches were multiplying faster than even Grey Knights could contain. In 72 hours, Armageddon would be fully invested by chaos, regardless of Entity Prime's fate. They needed a miracle. 72 hours, Voldis said, and felt the words damn him even as he spoke them. You have 72 hours to prove your method works. But the moment, the instant, I detect chaos, corruption, or demonic influence, I will personally end you. His nemesis sword ignited with psychic fire. And if you're simply manipulating us towards some darker purpose, death will be the kindest thing I offer. Spawn nodded, accepting the terms. Fair enough. Now clear the plaza. What I'm about to do is going to get weird, and I don't want anyone caught in the crossfire if it goes wrong. The civilians retreated reluctantly, but Mara Coast's sharp commands organized them into defensive positions around the plaza's perimeter. The Grey Knights withdrew to a 50-meter cordon, weapons ready, psychic senses extended to their maximum range, waiting for the first sign of corruption. Spawn stood alone in the plaza's center and reached deep into his necroplasmic core, accessing power he had rarely used even in his own universe. Creation rather than destruction. The energy that had remade heaven and hell, that had forged new realities from cosmic rubble. His cape expanded outward, not as a weapon, but as a canvas. Necroplasm spread across the ground in intricate patterns. Not random chaos, but geometric precision that contained meaning in its structure. Sacred geometry, but not of any religion the Imperium would recognize. Mathematics of reality itself, the underlying code that determined how dimensions interacted. "What is it doing?" Brother Castiel whispered over Squad Vox. Hyperion's third eye studied the patterns and saw something that shouldn't exist. It's writing. Laws. Literally inscribing new rules into local reality. This is beyond psychic manipulation or demonic sorcery. It's reality architecture. The patterns completed, a mandala 50 meters in diameter, glowing with necroplasmic energy that pulsed in rhythm with something deeper than heartbeat. Spawn stood at its center and called out, "I need volunteers. People who felt the warp's touch but never been trained. Natural psychers who the Imperium would normally ship off to die feeding your emperor." Silence. Then, slowly, 17 people emerged from the crowd. Some were young, barely teenagers. Others were older, with the haunted look of people who had spent lifetimes suppressing abilities they didn't understand. All of them had lived in fear of the black ships, knowing that acknowledging their gifts meant death or worse. "You're safe here," Spawn said, and meant it. "What I'm about to teach you won't corrupt you or destroy you. It's going to hurt, I won't lie about that. But you'll survive. And when we're done, you'll be able to do something the Imperium says is impossible. Touch the warp without falling into it." Kellen Vrost was among the volunteers, Spawn noticed. The young revolutionary who had executed Arbites in the Revolution's name, now standing with shaking hands but determined eyes. "Why you?" Spawn asked him directly. "Because I made things worse," Kellen replied. "Killed people in your name. If I'm going to fix that, I need power to protect rather than destroy." He met Spawn's gaze without flinching. "Teach me to be better than what I was." Spawn studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "All right, all of you, step into the circle. This is going to feel like dying, because in a sense, you will be. The person who steps into this pattern won't be quite the same person who steps out." The 17 volunteers entered the necroplasmic mandala, and Spawn activated it. Power flowed, not from the warp, but from Spawn himself, through the geometric patterns, into the volunteers. They screamed as necroplasmic energy invaded their bodies, rewriting their psychic architecture at fundamental level, not corrupting them, but altering how they interfaced with the warp itself. The Grey Knights watched with weapons ready, sensors scanning for any hint of demonic taint. Hyperion's third eye tracked energy flows that made no sense according to established psychic theory. The volunteers' souls were being modified, but not in ways that created openings for possession. Instead, Spawn was building filters, barriers that would allow controlled warp access while preventing chaos intrusion. It was theoretical impossibility made manifest. 3 of the volunteers collapsed, their bodies unable to handle the transformation. Spawn's chains immediately wrapped around them, stabilizing their life signs, forcing their physiology to adapt. He poured more power into the process, his own reserves depleting at alarming rate. Entity Prime's energy signature is dropping 30%, one of the Grey Knights reported. It's exhausting itself. Good, Voldis said coldly. If it's a demon in disguise, this will force it to reveal its nature. But Spawn didn't reveal horns or tentacles or any sign of demonic origin. He just kept working, kept channeling, kept building the impossible filters that would allow these 17 humans to safely touch power that should destroy them. After 11 minutes of continuous transformation, the mandala's glow began to fade. The 17 volunteers stood, some swaying, some vomiting, all fundamentally changed. Their psychic signatures registered to the Grey Knight's senses, but wrong. Not sanctioned, not corrupted, but something entirely new. Stable, unsanctioned psychers. How do you feel? Spawn asked, his voice strained from power expenditure. Kellen Vrost looked at his hands, seeing ethereal energy dance between his fingers. Not the corrosive power of chaos, but something cleaner, controlled. I feel connected, like I can sense the warp, but it's not drowning me. There's a barrier, keeping the worst out while letting me access. He cut off, struggling for words to describe the impossible. You've built filters into their souls, Hyperion said, his voice filled with awe and horror. Permanent psychic architecture that allows warp access without vulnerability to possession. This violates every principle of established psychic science. Good, Spawn said. Your established science was built on the assumption that the Emperor's way was the only way. I just proved otherwise. He looked at the 17 volunteers. Now comes the real test. There's a warp breach 3 kilometers north, minor incursion, maybe a dozen bloodletters. You're going to close it. We don't know how. One of the volunteers protested, a woman in her 30s shaking with fear and newfound power. Then figure it out, Spawn said, his tone gentler. I gave you the tools and the protection. The technique, that's on you. Humanity's got to learn to save itself, not just wait for saviors. He gestured north. Grey Knights will escort you. They'll kill the demons. Your job is to seal the breach once it's clear. Voldis made a decision that would either validate or damn him. Squad Justinian, escort the Psychers, assist their effort. Do not intervene unless absolutely necessary. To Spawn, if even one of them falls to possession, this experiment ends with your head separated from your body. Understood, Spawn replied. The volunteer Psychers departed with their Grey Knights escort, and the plaza fell into tense silence. Civilians watched from perimeters. Space Marines maintained weapons lock on Spawn. Everyone waited to see if the impossible would work or if they were witnessing the prelude to demonic catastrophe. Spawn used the waiting time to address Mara Coast, who had remained in the plaza's edge. You've been organizing people, building structure from chaos. That's more important than anything I can do. Mara approached cautiously, aware that 50 Grey Knights tracked her every movement. The Red Angel acknowledges administration. There was dry humor in her voice. What's next, praising tax collection? Revolution needs logistics, Spawn said seriously. Food, water, medicine, waste disposal, all the boring shit that keeps people alive day to day. I can fight armies and banish demons, but I can't run a city. He met her eyes. You can. Keep doing it. Because when the Grey Knights and I are done killing each other or working together, whichever happens, someone needs to have built something worth preserving. You think we're going to kill each other? Mara asked, glancing at Voldis's imposing form. Maybe, Spawn admitted. Depends on whether my experiment works. Whether the Imperium can accept that their way isn't the only way. Whether... A psychic shockwave rippled across the hive, powerful enough to make even non-psychers stagger. The Grey Knights' auto-senses screamed warnings. Hyperion's third eye snapped toward the north, where the volunteer psychers had gone. The breach, Hyperion reported, his voice tight with disbelief. It's closing, not being held open by psychic suppression, not temporarily sealed. Actually closing. The volunteers are reweaving reality itself, forcing the warp back without the Emperor's infrastructure. Silence. Then one of the volunteers, Kellen Vrost, appeared on Vox channels, his voice shaking with exhaustion and triumph. Red Angel, it worked. The breach is sealed. We sealed it. Without corruption, without possession, we actually did it. The plaza erupted. Civilians cheered. Some Grey Knights shifted uneasily, their absolute certainties challenged by impossible evidence. Spawn felt no triumph, only exhausted relief that his gamble hadn't killed everyone. 17 isn't enough, Spawn said to Voldis. Armageddon has hundreds of breaches. I need to repeat this process with hundreds of volunteers, maybe thousands. Can your Grey Knights protect them while they learn? Can you accept that the Imperium's monopoly on sanctioned psychers isn't necessary? Voldis stood in silence for 30 seconds, an eternity in combat time. His entire worldview, 3 centuries of absolute faith, warred with empirical evidence standing before him. Finally, we protect. That is our purpose. To stand between humanity and demonic predation. If your method genuinely accomplishes that without chaos corruption, he deactivated his nemesis sword. Then we will protect these new psychers while they seal the breaches. But Entity Prime, understand this. The moment any fall to corruption, the moment chaos gains foothold through your filters, we end this. Permanently. Fair, Spawn agreed. What followed over the next 68 hours would be recorded in Imperial records as the Armageddon aberration, Entity Prime's mass creation of stable unsanctioned psychers. 3,417 volunteers underwent the transformation. 203 died in the process, their bodies unable to adapt despite Spawn's intervention. The survivors became something unprecedented. Humans who could channel warp energy without sanctioning, without the Emperor's infrastructure, without falling to chaos. They sealed 412 warp breaches. They learned, through trial and error, to reinforce reality itself, not through faith in the Emperor, but through collective understanding of the barriers between materium and immaterium. They proved that the Imperium's way was not the only way, and in doing so, they shattered the foundation of 10,000 years of Imperial doctrine. On the 68th hour, as the last major breach sealed and Armageddon stabilized, Spawn collapsed. His necroplasmic reserves depleted to dangerous levels, having transformed over 3,000 humans and personally banished hundreds of demons. He knelt in the plaza where it had all begun, chains hanging loose, cape barely maintaining cohesion. Grandmaster Voldis approached, his nemesis sword sheathed. You kept your word. No corruption, no demonic influence. These new psychers are stable. The admission clearly pained him. The Inquisition will condemn what has happened here. The Ecclesiarchy will scream heresy. The Imperium cannot allow this precedent. I know, Spawn said tiredly. Which means they'll come for Armageddon again. Bigger fleet. more thorough, won't stop until every witness is dead and the planet's atmosphere is glass. Yes, Voldus confirmed. Unless. Spawn looked up at the Grand Master. Unless Armageddon disappears from Imperial records entirely, Voldus said. And the words carried weight of absolute commitment. If no one reports what happened here, if all communications are lost, if Armageddon becomes a mystery, planet gone silent, investigations inconclusive. His ancient eyes held something like respect. Then the Imperium cannot respond to what it does not know occurred. Spawn understood immediately. You'd lie for us. Cover this up. Protect Armageddon by making it invisible. I would protect humanity, Voldus corrected, as I have for 3 centuries. And if humanity's best chance involves unsanctioned psychers and revolutionary ideology. He made the sign of the Aquila, but the gesture seemed more reflexive than faithful. Then perhaps the Emperor's protection takes forms we have not previously recognized. It was the closest thing to heresy a Grey Knight could express. Around them, Armageddon breathed, damaged, chaotic, revolutionary, but alive, free from the Imperium's direct control. Defended not by faith in a corpse god, but by humans who had learned to protect themselves. Spawn had broken the machine. And from the wreckage, something new was growing. But he knew this was just the beginning. The Imperium would notice Armageddon's silence eventually. Other worlds would hear rumors. The precedent would spread. And then the real war would begin. Not against demons or xenos, but against the fundamental question of whether humanity needed the Imperium at all. 6 months after what the survivors called the liberation, and what Spawn called the disaster that somehow didn't end in apocalypse. Armageddon had transformed into something the Imperium had no classification for. A functioning human society that operated outside Imperial control. The changes were visible from orbit. Hive in furnace no longer belched the characteristic toxic smog of Imperial industrial production. The corpse starch processing plants had been converted to hydroponic facilities growing actual food. The Administratum's Gothic architecture remained, but now served as community centers rather than bureaucratic fortresses. And most telling, the giant Aquila emblems that had dominated every surface had been removed, replaced with nothing. Just blank space where once Imperial iconography had proclaimed eternal dominion. Spawn stood atop the same spire where he had shielded the hive from Exterminatus, watching the sunset paint Armageddon's slowly healing sky in shades of orange and purple rather than industrial gray. His necroplasmic reserves had mostly recovered, though 6 months of continuous demon fighting had left marks even on his regenerative armor. Behind him, footsteps approached, deliberately loud, announcing presence rather than attempting stealth. Mara Coast, now effectively the governor of Hive in Furnace through popular consensus rather than Imperial appointment, climbed the final stairs to join him. "We need to talk about the Mechanicus," Mara said without preamble. Spawn didn't turn. They're still refusing to cooperate? Worse, Tech Priest Dominus Hexar has declared our modifications to industrial equipment tech heresy, and is threatening to detonate the Forge's plasma reactor rather than let unsanctioned innovations continue. Mara's voice carried frustration born of 6 months negotiating with fanatics. We've tried reasoning with them, offered compromises, even let them maintain their religious practices. But they won't budge on anything that doesn't match their sacred standard template constructs. So they'd rather die and take half the hive with them than admit there might be better ways to build things, Spawn said. It wasn't a question. Essentially, yes. Mara moved to stand beside him, looking out over the city she was trying to save. We need those forge facilities to maintain infrastructure, but I won't sacrifice people's lives to appease machine-worshipping zealots. Spawn was silent for a moment. Then, what do you want me to do? Threaten them? Kill them? I can probably break their facility, extract the critical equipment before the reactor blows. I want you to talk to them, Mara said. You're the only person on this planet who successfully made fanatics question their faith. I made Grandmaster Volda's question for about 3 seconds before 3 centuries of conditioning snapped back into place, Spawn corrected. And that was life or death crisis. These tech priests aren't facing immediate demon incursion. They're comfortable in their certainty. Then make them uncomfortable. Spawn finally turned to face her. You're asking me to break them. That's what making them uncomfortable means. Shatter their worldview, destabilize their identity, leave them questioning everything they've built their lives around. His eyes blazed with old pain. I've done that to people. It doesn't end well. Neither does half a hive dying in a plasma explosion, Mara countered. She met his gaze without flinching. 6 months ago, you told me revolution needed logistics. Well, logistics needs functional forges. We're at an impasse, and people will die if it continues. So either you help or you're asking if I'll let people die to avoid breaking a few fanatics' brains. Spawn finished. Yeah, I hear you. He looked back at the city. Give me 4 hours. If I can't talk them down, I'll evacuate the threatened sectors and let their reactor blow. The Mechanicus can die for their principles if they want. I won't force them to live. That's cold, Mara observed. That's respect, Spawn corrected. They get to choose their own fate, even if I think their choice is stupid. 2 hours later, Spawn walked into the forge complex, a massive facility that had once produced ammunition, armor plating, and weapons for the Imperium's endless wars. Now it sat mostly idle. The Mechanicus tech priests barricaded inside, their binary cant prayers echoing through empty production halls. Tech priest Dominus Hexar waited in the forge's central chamber, surrounded by 20 of his most devoted adherents. Each bore extensive augmentation, more machine than flesh, their humanity sacrificed piece by piece to the Omnissiah's glory. Hexar himself was barely recognizable as having once been human, his organic components limited to a brain encased in armored housing and a few vital organs maintaining that brain's function. Entity Prime, Hexar's Vox Grill announced, his voice stripped of emotion by mechanical filtration. You enter sacred ground. The Omnissiah's temples are not for heretics who would defile the machine god's mysteries with unsanctioned innovation. Spawn looked around the forge, at machinery that was deliberately inefficient because efficiency improvements weren't in the standard template constructs, at safety protocols that killed workers because deaths were acceptable losses, at religious dogma that had calcified into actively harmful practice. I'm not here to defile anything, Spawn said. I'm here because you're threatening to blow up half a city rather than accept improvements to your equipment. There are no improvements, Hexar replied with absolute certainty. The standard template constructs represent the Omnissiah's perfect design. To alter them is to suggest the machine god's will is imperfect. Such heresy cannot be tolerated. Your STCs are 10,000 years old, Spawn said. Designed for a civilization that doesn't exist anymore. Optimized for materials you don't have access to, built for purposes that have changed. Of course, there are improvements. Heresy. Math, Spawn corrected. Engineering, science. The things your machine god was supposedly based on before your cult turned it into mysticism and prayer. He stepped closer to Hexar, his chains rattling. You want to die for your principles? Fine. But you don't get to take thousands of civilians with you because you can't accept that dogma isn't divine. Hexar's mechadendrites twitched in what might have been agitation. The Omnissiah's will is absolute. We are its instruments. To deviate is to cease function. Spawn studied the tech priest, seeing past the augmentation to the terrified human underneath, someone who had sacrificed their flesh, their identity, their humanity piece by piece to serve a machine god they'd never questioned, someone who had made suffering into faith and couldn't imagine existence without it. He had been there once. Different details, same pattern. You know what I did in my universe? Spawn asked, his voice dropping to something quieter. I killed God. Literally. Stormed heaven, fought the angels, put a spear through the bastard who'd been orchestrating human suffering for millennia and called it divine plan. The tech priests recoiled, their mechadendrites writhing in distress. Such blasphemy was beyond heresy. It was ontological attack on their fundamental understanding of reality. And you know what I found when God died? Spawn continued. That the universe kept working. Stars didn't go out, physics didn't break. People kept living, kept building, kept creating meaning without divine authority telling them how. His eyes blazed. The same will be true of your Omnissiah. If it exists at all, it doesn't need your death cult to function. And if it doesn't exist, if it's just ancient technology you've mythologized into a deity, then you've been praying to machines that don't care about your prayers. Heresy! Multiple tech priests shouted in digital unison. Honesty, Spawn said. Which I know is terrifying when you've built your entire identity on lies. But here's the thing. Hexar, I'm not going to kill you to make you cooperate. I'm not going to force you to compromise. You get to choose. Keep your dogma and die for it. Or question your dogma and maybe discover your machine. God is bigger than your limited understanding of it. The standard template constructs are absolute, Hexar insisted, but his Vox grill carried a tremor of uncertainty. To alter them is to admit humans can improve on the past. Spawn interrupted. That knowledge isn't fixed. That maybe, just maybe, the people who made your STCs 10,000 years ago didn't have all the answers and would want their descendants to keep innovating. He gestured at the forge's machinery. Your machine god, if it exists, isn't served by stagnation. It's betrayed by it. Silence. The tech priest's binary cant prayers fell quiet as they processed concepts their faith had spent lifetimes suppressing. Doubt wasn't just heresy. It was system failure, the spiritual equivalent of software corruption. Tech Priest Auxiliary Zeta 5, the same one who had been part of Inquisitor Covenant's kill team 6 months ago, spoke with uncharacteristic hesitation. Entity Prime raises troubling questions. If the Omnissiah's wisdom manifests through technological progress, and we prevent progress in favor of stagnant repetition of ancient designs, are we not serving the Omnissiah's opposite? Heresy, Hexar snapped. The STCs represent perfect. Nothing is perfect, Zeta 5 interrupted. And the fact that a lower-ranking tech priest contradicted a Dominus showed how deeply Spawn's words had penetrated. Perfection implies no room for improvement. But the Omnissiah's own history shows constant innovation, constant advancement, constant refinement. His optical sensors focused on Hexar. We have become Luddites worshipping technology rather than technologists serving the machine god's true purpose. advancement. The Forge's atmosphere shifted. Other tech priests began murmuring, not in binary cant, but in actual Gothic, debating rather than reciting dogma. The certainty that had sustained them fractured, and in the cracks, genuine theological discussion emerged. Hexar stood isolated, his worldview collapsing around him. He had spent 80 years in service to the Omnissiah, sacrificed his flesh piece by piece, endured countless augmentations, all in absolute faith that the STCs were sacred and immutable. And now one of his own subordinates was suggesting that faith was itself heretical. "I should detonate the reactor," Hexar said, but his Vox grill carried no conviction. "Purge this heresy with nuclear fire." "You should make a choice," Spawn said. "Die for dogma that might be wrong, or live with uncertainty and keep serving in whatever way proves most effective." His chains hung loose, non-threatening. "I won't stop you either way, but I will evacuate everyone else first, so only zealots die in your explosion." Hexar's mechadendrites drooped, a gesture his augmented body shouldn't have been capable of, some vestigial organic behavior bleeding through mechanical control. If the STCs are not absolute, if the Omnissiah's will permits innovation, then 80 years of service have been based on misunderstanding. Or, Zeta 5 offered quietly, 80 years of service have been preparing you to accept a deeper truth, that the machine god works through us, not despite us, that we honor the Omnissiah best by continuing the work of innovation and improvement that created the STCs in the first place. It was elegant theology, a way to reconcile dogma with progress, to maintain faith while abandoning stagnation. Whether it was true didn't matter. What mattered was, it gave Hexar a path forward that didn't require either death or complete rejection of his identity. "I would need to see evidence," Hexar said slowly. "Proof that alterations serve the Omnissiah rather than heresy." "Then work with Mara Coast's engineers," Spawn said. "Test innovations. Compare results. Let data inform faith rather than letting faith deny data." He moved toward the exit, then paused. "And Hexar? The fact that you're willing to question means you're stronger than you think. Certainty is comfortable. Doubt takes courage." Spawn left the forge before Hexar could respond. Behind him, the tech priests began what would become a 6-month theological debate about the nature of the Omnissiah, the purpose of the Mechanicus, and whether faith could coexist with innovation. The reactor didn't explode. Mara Coast's engineers gained access to forge facilities. Improvements began, slowly, carefully, with tech priests documenting every change and debating its theological implications, but improvements nonetheless. Another piece of the Imperium's foundation cracked. But that same day, 3 systems away, something else happened that would prove far more dangerous. An inquisitorial conclave convened to address the Armageddon question. Inquisitor Silas Covenant stood before 13 of his peers, representatives from Ordo Hereticus, Ordo Xenos, and Ordo Malleus. Behind him, hololithic displays showed the evidence he had accumulated. Pict captures of Entity Prime, testimony from survivors, data on the new Psychers, and most damning, Grand Master Voldus's official report claiming inconclusive investigation, despite clear evidence of massive Imperial doctrine violations. "Armageddon has fallen," Covenant announced, his voice carrying the weight of terrible certainty. Not to chaos, not to xenos, but to something potentially more dangerous. A functional alternative to Imperial governance. The other Inquisitors studied the evidence with cold analytical precision. These were people who had authorized planet burnings for lesser heresies, who measured acceptable losses in billions, who viewed mercy as a tactical consideration rather than moral imperative. Entity Prime must be eliminated, Inquisitor Veritas of the Ordo Hereticus declared. Its ideology is a virus more dangerous than genestealer infection. Already, Vox transmissions from 17 systems reference the Red Angel and suggest similar rebellion. Elimination has proven ineffective. Covenant replied. Space Marines failed. Grey Knights failed. Exterminatus fleet failed. Entity Prime cannot be killed by conventional means. Then, unconventional means, Inquisitor Cryptman of Ordo Xenos said. His specialty was xenocide, the complete eradication of alien species. If the entity operates outside standard physical laws, we use weapons that operate outside those same laws. He activated a hololithic file marked Redacted Inquisitor Eyes Only. The Halo devices, Necron technology confiscated during the Orphean War. Reality-anchoring artifacts that force localized causality to obey specific parameters. The image showed curved metallic constructs covered in symbols that hurt to look at. Necron phase technology that predated the Imperium by millions of years. The Halo devices are explicitly forbidden by the Conclave of Terra, another Inquisitor protested. Their use constitutes tech heresy of the highest order. So does allowing Entity Prime to continue spreading revolutionary ideology. Cryptman countered. We measure heresies against each other and choose the lesser evil. This is our duty. Covenant felt something cold settle in his chest. 6 months ago, he would have agreed immediately. Now, after watching Entity Prime save Armageddon from demons, after seeing stable unsanctioned psychers prove the Imperium's doctrine wasn't absolute necessity. What if Entity Prime is correct? Covenant said quietly. The Conclave fell silent. Inquisitor Covenant, Veritas said, her voice dangerous. Explain yourself. What if the Imperium's structure, the authoritarianism, the faith enforcement, the grinding of billions into meat for the machine? What if it's not necessary? Covenant gestured at the evidence. Armageddon functions without us, better than it did under Imperial control. Demon incursions contained without the Emperor's infrastructure, citizens organizing effective governance without administratum oversight. What if everything we've done for 10,000 years has been unnecessary? Heresy, Veritas declared. Inquisitor Covenant, you are relieved of authority pending investigation of chaos corruption. I'm not corrupted, Covenant said tiredly. I'm just tired. Tired of burning worlds, tired of sacrificing billions, tired of calling atrocity necessity. He looked at his peers. Entity Prime asked me once how many innocent people I'd killed because they knew too much. I didn't answer because I'd lost count. As have we all, Cryptman said, not unsympathetically. It is the burden of our office to make terrible choices so that humanity survives. Your doubt is understandable, Covenant, but it cannot be permitted to compromise operational effectiveness. 2 inquisitorial stormtroopers moved to restrain Covenant. He didn't resist. The Halo devices will be deployed to Armageddon within 1 month, Veritas announced. Entity Prime will be contained or destroyed, the revolutionary elements purged, and Imperial control restored. Grandmaster Voldus will be investigated for dereliction of duty. She made the sign of the Aquila. This is the Emperor's will. This is necessary. As they took Covenant away, he thought about Spawn's words. Systems that grind people into meat and call it necessary. He had served that system for 70 years, believed in it, killed for it. and now he wondered if every death had been for nothing more than perpetuating a lie. On Armageddon, Spawn felt the shift in the warp. Something was coming, something that moved through reality differently than ships or demons. Something ancient and deliberately malevolent. Technology used for purposes its creators would never have sanctioned. He looked skyward, his enhanced senses detecting distortions in space-time fabric that suggested incoming phase shift technology. "Mara," Spawn said into his Vox-bead communicator. "Something's coming. Something worse than Grey Knights or Exterminatus. Get people to shelters. Lock down critical infrastructure. This is about to get biblical." "How bad?" Mara asked. Spawn thought about the reality-warping technology he sensed approaching, about an Imperium desperate enough to use forbidden xenos artifacts, about the inevitable confrontation between his power and weapons designed specifically to counter beings like him. "Bad enough that I might not be able to protect everyone," Spawn admitted. "Bad enough that Armageddon might burn regardless of what I do." His chains coiled tighter. "But I'm going to try. Because what else is there?" The Halo devices translated into real space 300 kilometers above Armageddon, carried by a specialist inquisitorial vessel. They activated immediately, and reality itself began to scream. The final battle for Armageddon, and for the precedent it represented, was about to begin. The Halo devices did not announce their arrival with the roar of thrusters or the tear of a warp rift. They simply were 3 concentric rings of necrodermis that materialized in high orbit, their surfaces etched with geometries that defied mortal comprehension. They hummed with a sound below hearing, a frequency that resonated with the fundamental laws of physics and found them wanting. On the surface, the effect was instantaneous and agonizing. Spawn felt his connection to the necroplasmic wellspring, the source of his power that transcended this universe's warp. Stutter and fray. It was like a hand closing around his soul, not with demonic corruption, but with absolute, unyielding order. The Halo devices were enforcing a single, rigid version of reality, and his existence, his very power, was a violation of its terms. His cape, which moments before had billowed with sentient energy, slumped against his back like dead cloth. The chains around his body grew heavy, their hellfire guttering to faint embers. For the first time since his arrival in the 41st millennium, Spawn felt limited, contained. "What is this?" Mara Coast's voice crackled over the Vox, strained with panic. "The power grids are failing. The psychers, they're screaming. It feels like the air itself is turning to stone." "Reality anchors," Spawn gritted out, forcing his legs to move against the sudden, crushing weight. "Xenos tech. They're not trying to kill me with firepower. They're trying to unmake me by making this universe less flexible." He looked skyward, his enhanced vision piercing the haze to see the cold, silver rings. They're making a cage of physics itself. In the commandeered Administratum Center, the hololithic displays flickered and died. The volunteer psychers, Armageddon's newfound protectors, collapsed, their hard-won connection to the warp severed by the Halo device's null field on a planetary scale. The subtle, collective psychic barrier they had woven over the Hive city shattered. In the ensuing silence, a new sound began. The familiar, gut-wrenching tear of a warp rift, this one larger than any before. The devices had neutralized Spawn and the Psychers, but in doing so, they had also dismantled every defense against the one enemy the Imperium feared most. From the new rift, located in the dead center of the reclaimed main plaza, poured not the mindless fury of Khorne or the despair of Nurgle, but the intricate, crystalline horror of Tzeentch. Thousands of pink horrors cackled into existence, their forms splitting and multiplying even as they landed. Behind them came flamers, exhaling jets of blue fire that transmuted stone to glass and flesh to screaming crystal. And at the heart of the breach, a familiar presence gathered, another Lord of Change, drawn by the catastrophic unraveling of its predecessor and the tantalizing prize of a world stripped of its defenses. Spawn watched the demonic tide begin to flood the streets. He saw the Grey Knights, who had been maintaining a wary perimeter, immediately pivot to face the new threat. Grandmaster Voldus's silver armor gleamed as he raised his nemesis sword, his warriors forming a battle line without hesitation. They would fight. They would die. They would likely even banish the greater demon. But they couldn't stop the thousands of lesser demons from slaughtering the unprotected populace in the process, all because the Inquisition had been more afraid of his example than of chaos. A bitter laugh escaped Spawn's lips. You never learn, do you? You'd rather let the demons win than admit there might be another way. His chains felt like iron weights, his cape a lead blanket. The halo devices pressed down on him, their purpose clear: to force him to obey the local laws of reality, to make him just another physical entity in a universe of physical entities. A powerful one, perhaps, but not a reality warper, not a godslayer. But Al Simmons had never needed godhood to be dangerous. He began to walk toward the breach. Each step was a monumental effort, the air thick as syrup. A pink horror scampered toward him, cackling and lashed out with claws of solidified magic. Spawn didn't block with his crippled cape. He simply moved his head aside, let the claws scrape harmlessly against his armored cheek, and grabbed the demon by its throat. His physical strength, born of his hell-forged physiology, was undiminished. He crushed its neck, and the demon dissolved into two smaller, struggling blue horrors. You're trying to make me play by your rules, Spawn snarled, not at the demons, but at the cold, silent rings in the sky. Fine, let's play. He broke into a run. It wasn't the effortless, teleporting glide he was used to. It was a soldier's sprint, the kind he'd used a lifetime ago as a Marine, then as a CIA assassin. Ground-eating, efficient, and brutally direct. His chains, though drained of their hellfire, were still unbreakable lengths of necroplasmic metal. He used them as whips and grapples, lashing out to snare flamers and drag them into melee range before they could unleash their transmuting fire, smashing through crystalline bodies with raw, physical force. He was a brawler again, a soldier, a man with a mission and the tools to complete it, one bloody step at a time. He fought his way toward the Grey Knights' line. Voldus stood at its center, his force halberd cleaving through a Zangor, his psychic hood blazing as he deflected bolts of sorcerous fire. "Voldus!" Spawn yelled, his voice raw without its supernatural amplification. "The devices. They're cutting me off, but they're also cutting everything off. Your psychers are next." Voldus beheaded a horror before turning, his helmeted gaze sweeping over Spawn. He could see the difference, the diminished aura, the lack of terrifying, reality-bending power. He saw a warrior, not a force of nature. "The Inquisition has doomed this world to save its doctrine," Voldus replied, his voice grim. "Our duty is clear. We hold the line until the demons are banished or we are dead." "Your duty is to protect humanity," Spawn countered, ducking under a sweep of a demon's blade and responding with a punch that shattered its torso. "That thing in orbit is a bigger threat to them right now than this demon army. It's making them helpless. The Halo devices are a sanctioned inquisitorial tool. To interfere is heresy. Then let me be the heretic, Spawn roared. Give me a way up there, a ship, a teleporter, anything. I'll break their toys, you clean up this mess. It's the only way anyone on this planet survives the hour. The calculation in Voldis's mind was visible in the slight tilt of his helmet. Heresy against pragmatism, doctrine against survival. He had already compromised once for this world. Could he do it again, this time explicitly betraying the orders of his own Inquisition? A blast of warp fire incinerated 2 Grey Knights to their left, their silver armor offering no protection against the conceptual flame. The line wavered. "Brother Captain Alaric," Voldis commanded. "Your squad will escort Entity Prime to the orbital teleportarium in Sector Primus. Assist its boarding action against the inquisitorial vessel Purity of Will." Alaric, who had faced Spawn months before, didn't hesitate. "By your command, Grandmaster." He gestured to Spawn. "Come, Entity. Let us commit this necessary heresy." The journey to the secured teleportarium was a brutal, running battle through demon-infested streets. Spawn fought with a focused, vicious economy of motion that impressed even the Grey Knights. He was no longer an unstoppable cosmic force, but he was a perfect weapon. Every movement designed to kill, to disable, to survive. He used the environment, hurling debris, collapsing walkways on packs of horrors, and using his chains to swing across gaps when bridges were out. They reached the teleportarium, a heavily fortified complex guarded by a handful of Grey Knights who had secured it against the demonic incursion. The tech priest operating the array looked from Alaric to Spawn with visible terror. "The coordinates are set for the Purity of Will's main hangar," the tech priest stammered. "But the Halo devices, the interference is immense. Teleportation is borderline suicidal." "Calculate the trajectory," Alaric ordered. "We go regardless." "No," Spawn said. "Just me. This isn't your fight. It's my mess. I started this. I'll finish it." Alaric studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "The Emperor protects." "He'd better not," Spawn said, stepping onto the teleportation pad. "I work better alone." The world dissolved into a screaming vortex of light and pain. The Halo devices fought the teleportation every inch of the way, trying to reassert local causality, to smear him across the void. Spawn felt his molecules being pulled apart, his consciousness fraying at the edges. He clung to one thing, his rage. Not at the demons, not at the Imperium, but at the sheer, stupid, stubborn waste of it all. He rematerialized inside a storm of shrieking alarms and weapon fire. He was in the hangar bay of the Purity of Will, and the inquisitorial stormtroopers stationed there had been waiting. Bolter rounds ricocheted off his armor. He didn't have the power to absorb them anymore, but they still couldn't pierce his innate durability. He was a bullet. His target was the bridge. He moved, a red and black phantom in the confined space of the starship. His chains lashed out, disarming, disabling. But he held back from killing. These were just soldiers, following orders. The ones giving the orders were his target. He smashed through bulkheads, ripped through sealed doors, and ignored the small arms fire that peppered his back. He was a force of nature once more, not through magic, but through sheer, unstoppable momentum. He found the bridge. The doors were reinforced adamantium, inscribed with warding seals. He didn't slow down. He hit them at a full sprint, shoulder first, and the immense magnetic locks shattered under the impact. Inquisitor Veritas stood at the command throne, her plasma pistol already aimed. Beside her, Inquisitor Cryptman observed coldly, a data slate in hand. "Entity Prime, Veritas said. "You are too late. The Halo devices are active. Your power is neutered. Surrender, and we may grant the populace a swift..." Spawn crossed the distance before she could finish. He didn't teleport. He was just fast. He slapped the plasma pistol from her hand, the weapon clattering across the deck. His other hand wrapped around her throat, not squeezing, just holding. "Turn them off," Spawn said, his voice a low, deadly whisper. "Never," she choked out. "The precedent you set must be erased. Better a world dies pure than lives in heresy. You don't get to make that choice for billions of people." Spawn looked at Cryptman. "You. Turn them off." Cryptman didn't even flinch. "The data is fascinating. Your physical resilience remains, even when your metaphysical capabilities are suppressed. This will be invaluable for the next phase of containment." Spawn looked from one Inquisitor to the other and saw the same unshakable certainty he had seen in Captain Mordred, in Hexar, in the heart of the Imperium itself. A certainty that valued ideology over life, control over freedom, purity over survival. He was tired of talking. He dropped Veritas and turned to the main console. His chains, acting on his will, smashed into the delicate machinery. He didn't know the codes or the rituals. He knew force. He ripped out control panels, shattered data looms, and crushed the console into sparking ruin. On the hololithic display, the status of the Halo devices flickered from active to error. The pressure vanished. On Armageddon, the volunteer psychers gasped as their connection to the warp snapped back into place. The nascent warp rift shuddered as their collective will, combined with the focused purging of the Grey Knights, began to seal it. On the bridge of the purity of will, Spawn felt the necroplasmic energy flood back into him. His cape billowed with malevolent life. His chains ignited with green hellfire. The Inquisitors stared, their certainty finally cracking in the face of his restored, impossible power. "You see?" Spawn said, his voice once again echoing with hellish resonance. "This is what you don't understand. You can build all the cages you want. You can burn all the worlds you want. But the second you let your guard down, the second you think you've won..." The hellfire in his eyes blazed bright enough to cast long, dancing shadows across the bridge. "As something like me will always get out." He didn't kill them. They weren't worth the effort. He simply turned, opened a dimensional rift with a thought, and stepped through, leaving them alive on their broken bridge to contemplate the ruin of their plans. He reappeared on the surface of Armageddon, in the center of the plaza. The demons were in full retreat, the Grey Knights and the volunteer psychers pushing them back through the closing rift. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. He looked at the faces around him, the hopeful, the determined, the survivors. They had seen the Imperium try to kill them to get to him. They had seen him leave and return. They had saved themselves, with his help, but also with their own newfound strength. He had broken the machine on Armageddon, but the greater machine, the Imperium of Man, had taken notice. It would be back. With different weapons, different strategies, an endless tide of fanatics and soldiers determined to stamp out the heresy of hope. Spawn had not destroyed Warhammer 40K, not yet. But he had lit a fire in the darkness, and he would guard that flame for as long as it took against any who sought to extinguish it. The story of Armageddon did not end with a triumphant declaration of independence or the final, crushing victory of the Imperium. It ended, as most true revolutions do, in a tense and fragile stalemate. The planet became a ghost in the Imperial machine. stricken from active records, its tithe status listed as catastrophic loss, demonic incursion. Its name whispered only in the most secretive of inquisitorial conclaves and the most hopeful of Underhive taverns. Grandmaster Voldus maintained his fiction, and the Grey Knights, having witnessed both the cost of dogma and the possibility of an alternative, became silent guardians of the secret. Armageddon was left to its own devices, a single flickering star in the oppressive darkness of the 41st millennium. Spawn did not become its king, its god, or its permanent protector. He had learned that lesson across multiple lifetimes. Instead, he became a watchman. He patrolled the space around the system, a spectral warden whose presence discouraged the more overt Imperial responses. He would return to the surface periodically, a grim reminder that their hard-won freedom existed under the shadow of his power and the threat he represented to the galaxy at large. He helped Mara Coast's fledgling government train its unique corps of psychers, not as weapons of war, but as architects of reality, reinforcing the veil between realms. He even reached an uneasy truce with the reformed Mechanicus cult, who now worshipped the omnissiah of progress, their forges humming with sanctioned innovation. The true victory was not in the battles won, but in the simple, profound fact of Armageddon's continued existence. Children were born who would never know the taste of corpse starch or the fear of the black ships. People spoke their minds without immediately fearing an Arbite's bullet. It was messy, flawed, and constantly threatened, but it was life, not mere survival. Spawn had not destroyed Warhammer 40K. The Imperium was too vast, too entrenched, its inertia too great for anyone being to shatter, no matter how powerful. But he had done something perhaps more significant. He had proven it was possible. He had created a crack in the monolith. He had shown that the brutal, self-perpetuating cycle of oppression and war was not an unchangeable law of the universe, but a choice, a terrible 10,000-year-old choice. The story of the Red Angel and the world that defied heaven became a myth, a seed of an idea that spread through the grim darkness of the far future, taking root in desperate hearts across the galaxy. The Imperium could burn 1,000 worlds, but it could not burn a question. What if?